Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 321. Act straightforwardly. The strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace quickly fell back and vanished, leaving behind a mess. Qin Mu frowned slightly. This youth called Yubuchuan was a ruthless character, and his decisions were firm, without any hesitation. Such an outstanding youth was rarely seen in the current times. A very outstanding youth. Qin Mu rather admired him as he placed the mother and daughter down. The dragon Qilin walked over and grumbled, "Cult Master, haven't you caused trouble? Now that we antagonize these people, if they decide to fight with us outside the basin, they can just transform any mountain into a mountain giant and crush us to death. This is Great Ruins, not West Earth," Qin Mu said while shaking his head. "To fight with me in my territory? They won't even know how they died. Besides, the bond between the mother and the daughter has moved me. If I didn't act straightforwardly, wouldn't it be considered heresy?" The dragon Qilin stared at him blankly. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, this was a good way to summarize the great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Furthermore, the next sentence was, "That's the meaning of path. This was the path. This then is Heavenly Saint Cult Master." The dragon Qilin sighed ruefully in his heart. He didn't understand Qin Mu's actions, but every move and action he took was according to the teachings of Heavenly Saint Cult. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, that's the meaning of path. Qin Mu had already achieved the step and started to walk on his own path. No wonder the young patriarch had chosen him as the next cult master and no one else. It was also no wonder that the hall master and elders of Heavenly Devil Cult were willing to accept him. Qin Mu checked the injuries of the young woman and asked, "This lady, what exactly is your background? Why are the people of West Earth's True Heaven Palace after your lives?" The young woman was holding onto her last breath when she raised her head up. "I'm the Nai Kuei of True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu turned around and asked the dragon Qilin, "What's the meaning of Nai Kuei?" Nai Kuei means Princess Mother. The women are the ones in charge of the family in West Earth's True Heaven Palace, having visiting marriage with the men. At night there would be a banquet, and after the songs and dances, if both sides take a liking to each other, they will go to the woman's house to consummate, the dragon Qilin explained. The next morning, the man must leave. This would happen a few more times, the man and woman spending a few nights together until the woman gets pregnant, giving birth and raising the child. The child would then usually know their mother but not their father. Patriarch had gone for a visiting marriage there before, that old degenerate. Qin Mu gave him a stare. "Don't talk bad about Patriarch. Say the important stuff." The young patriarch had an extremely high image in his heart. Even though he looked like a young man that was about the same age as him, he was a flawless person to Qin Mu and couldn't be tainted. Patriarch was a casual and dissolute old degenerate before, wearing the outfits of different tribes to flirt everywhere in West Earth. And he didn't even have to take responsibility. That old degenerate was so happy that his buttocks jolted here and there. The dragon Qilin then saw that Qin Mu wasn't pleased and immediately changed the topic. The mistress of True Heaven Palace also needs to go through visiting marriage. If the palace master of True Heaven Palace is pregnant or has a child, if the child is a female, she will be the princess and the next successor. If it is a male, the child will be let out of the palace. The True Heaven Palace master that has a child will be called Princess Mother or Nai Kuei in the language of West Earth. The abilities of Nai Kuei are usually extremely strong. After all, the technique they cultivate is all things have spirit, all things have soul. Women are usually stronger than men in the attainments of this field. Qin Mu squatted down and took out silver needles to stab into the woman's body. He asked curiously, "Since you're True Heaven Palace master, the mistress of True Heaven Palace, how did you land into such a state? Aren't you an expert on divine bridge realm?" He then took out some spirit herbs and applied medicine according to the symptoms, refining spirit pills to cure her injuries. "Don't waste your efforts." The woman shook her head. "My injuries are already incurable. If my cultivation was still with me, I wouldn't have landed in this state. I was poisoned by Mu Ingxue, the most well-known poison maker. The poison she used on me is called coiling silk. The dragon Qilin chuckled. Don't worry. If Cult Master doesn't want you to die, not even Earth Count can take your soul away. Qin Mu's hand techniques changed as he skillfully refined the spirit pills while shaking his head. Don't brag. Be a little more humble. My medical expertise isn't the #1 in the world. I'm only #2. As for poison, at most #3 in the world. Little Poison King, that guy, is still stronger than me by a little. The young woman felt herself become more comfortable under Qin Mu's treatment and was bewildered. She said, My mother was the palace master. After she passed away, True Heaven Palace elected me as the successor. My cultivation realm was somewhat okay, so I could succeed with difficulty. However, an unforeseen event happened at the succession ceremony. I was poisoned by Mu Ingxue and my cultivation was reduced to nothing. The same happened to everyone in our Xiong family. Your family then took this chance to eradicate my Xiong family. I could only bring my daughter away. Qin Mu refined the medicinal energy while sighing ruefully. There's something wrong with how your True Heaven Palace manages things. The young woman was slightly angered and asked, What is wrong with the way we manage things? Qin Mu fused the medicinal energy and gathered it into a pill. There are 3 big sacred grounds in eternal peace. Great Thunderclap Monastery, Dao Sect, and my Heavenly Saint Cult. I'm the cult master, and when I succeeded as such, I was only on 5 elements realm, yet no one rebelled against me. The new Dao Master Lin Xian of Dao Sect has a cultivation realm similar to mine, yet no one in Dao Sect had rebelled and dethroned him. When old Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery left, the seat of Rulai is empty, but everyone is still living together in harmony, no one fighting one another to snatch the seat of Rulai. My Heavenly Saint Cult is sometimes called Heavenly Devil Cult in eternal peace, but even if we are fiendish, our inheritance is still in order. Comparing that to your True Heaven Palace, you guys are inferior. That's why I said that there's something wrong with the way you guys manage things. The young woman stared at him blankly. She wanted to retort, but she really couldn't find a way to do it. Qin Mu pinched open her mouth and fed her a spirit pill. His 2 fingers slid down her throat, and the vital qi on his fingertips brought the spirit pill all the way to her abdomen. With a few flicks, he catalyzed the medicinal energy of the spirit pill. His sleeves fluttered, and the young woman floated upward. As his 10 fingers danced around, he tapped countless times on her body, refining all the medicinal energy inside her body. When he stopped, the young woman landed on the ground. She staggered, but her internal injuries were already healing rapidly. Qin Mu turned around to look at the little girl who was adorable. She looked 4 to 5 years old and had 2 small braids. On her body were numerous gold, silver, and jade accessories, and they were all pretty good spirit weapons. He examined her and saw that she had only suffered some superficial wounds. She wasn't badly wounded and just need to apply some dragon saliva. Little sister, what's your name? Qin Mu asked. The little girl blinked her shiny black eyes and said in a loud and clear voice, Xiong Qier. My mom is called Xiong Xiu. Qin Mu smiled. Your mom is True Heaven Palace's master, so I can't call her by her name. I can only call her Palace Master. On the other hand, I can call you Qier. My name is Qin Mu. The young woman Xiong Xiu immediately said, Greet Uncle Qin. Qin Mu's expression instantly blackened, and he said to Xiong Xiu, I'm only 15 years old. Calling me Big Brother is fine. Xiong Xiu said with a troubled expression, Big Brother Qin. Qin Mu immediately said, I said to let Qier call me Big Brother, not you. Xiong Xiu's face immediately turned beet red. Qin Mu laughed out loud and made her stretch out her hand. He pricked her finger and took a drop of blood. Once he spread his hands apart, the drop of blood instantly swelled up by 10,000 times and transformed into a huge blood cell. 4 formation markings appeared in Qin Mu's pupils and transformed into Cyan Heaven's eyes. After examining the cell in detail, he said, So it's a poison that affects the vital qi, but doesn't do much damage to the body. Palace Master, pardon me. I'm going to enter your body and check your divine treasures. Xiong Xiu wanted to say something, but before she could, Qin Mu transformed into a black shadow and entered the heart of her brows. Xiong Xiu instantly felt the heart of her brows swell up, then the area of her heart, as if there was a tiny human tunneling to and fro in her body. Qin Mu checked all the way from spirit embryo divine treasure to celestial being divine treasure. When he came to life and death divine treasure, he couldn't help being astonished. It was actually open. Could she be a great expert on life and death realm? He transformed into a black shadow and entered Xiong Xiu's divine bridge divine treasure, and his heart trembled violently. The divine bridge divine treasure of this woman was actually open. I saved a female expert on the cult master level, and she actually called me Big Brother. Qin Mu became slightly giddy, but he composed himself before leaving Xiong Xiu's body. It was no wonder that she could become the palace master of a big sacred ground when she was in existence on Divine Bridge Realm. Xiong Xiu felt the abnormal feeling in her body vanish and immediately asked, "Cult Master Qin, the poison in my body. The poison has already entered your divine treasures through the circulation of your vital qi, tainting your divine treasures." Qin Mu calculated for a moment, then said, "If you had immediately closed off your divine treasures, the poison wouldn't have gone in so deeply and would be easy to remove. But now that it has entered the divine treasures, there will be some difficulty in refining it away." Xiong Xiu looked gray. Mu Yingxie's coiling silk's poison is unrivaled in the world. The longer I drag it out, the more exhausted will my vital qi become and my cultivation will drop even lower. Not long after that, I'm afraid I will become useless. Unrivaled in the world? Qin Mu smiled and said, "I only dare to call myself number 3 in the world in regards to poison, so how could she dare to call herself number 1? Don't worry, I can help you suppress the toxicity, so this poison won't continue to exhaust your cultivation. However, I don't have enough spirit herbs, so I will need to gather some." A thread of hope rose up in Xiong Xiu's heart. She struggled to get up while holding her daughter's hand. "Cult Master Qin, thank you very much. What I said yesterday was speaking and doing anything in a crisis, so I purposely tried to agitate Cult Master Qin." Qin Mu waved his hand, not minding it. He smiled. "Righteous person? I'm not one. Truth be told, my reputation isn't good in the eyes of the righteous path in Eternal Peace Empire. If you told them that Cult Master Qin of Heavenly Saint Cult is a righteous person, they would laugh their heads off." He picked Xiong Qiu up and placed her on the dragon Qilan's back. "Let's go." Xiong Xiu immediately said, "You Buochuan and the rest. This is Great Ruins and not West Earth," Qin Mu said leisurely. "Coming to Great Ruins means coming to my home. There, they can forget about playing any tricks." Xiong Xiu felt worried but could only follow after him. When she thought of it, it was quite weird that during the time she had been talking to him, her injuries had become much better and her footsteps also gradually felt lighter. When they walked out of the basin, her injuries had already healed. Qin Mu in the meantime looked around for spirit herbs. Whenever he saw some, he would go to pluck them. On the way out of the basin, he actually gathered hundreds of spirit herbs. As he plucked them, he refined them as well. Xiong Xiu was bewildered at the sight of it. Qin Mu had refined dozens of herbs, but he had stuffed all of them into his Taotai sack, so she didn't know what medicine he had refined. They came to a hill zone, and Qin Mu frowned slightly. There were verdant hills and limpid water, creating a pleasant scenery. There was actually no traces of strange beasts nor even little birds. Something's wrong. At this moment, they heard songs coming from ahead of them. The voices of the singers were charming and gentle, tugging at the heartstrings. Qin Mu threw a glance at the 2 white bats, and they immediately flew forward, toward the place from which the voices came. After a moment, the white bats flew back and said, "There's a lake ahead of you, and there are many naked girls bathing there." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 322. Attack of the Root Demon. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Many girls are bathing? What's so interesting bathing in the wilderness? Wait a minute. I've met girls bathing in the wilderness before. He was suddenly reminded of an incident and couldn't help shuddering. He muttered, "It couldn't be that old demon, right? Impossible, it couldn't survive so long in Great Ruins." I must be worrying too much. But to be careful, let's take a roundabout way. Suddenly, a loud voice came from behind. Dao friend, it's a small world, eh? Qin Mu turned his head back and saw Yu Buchuan leading all the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace over to kill them at an extremely fast speed. Those divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace cast their spells as they ran, and huge trees uprooted themselves, transforming into tree giants that sprinted forward with wide steps. At the same time, the ground trembled as mountain rocks rolled forward at a rapid speed, gathering together to form rock giants. Even the hill under Qin Mu's feet was trembling. The soil started to roll down. The mountain rocks in the hill rose up into a taller and taller structure until a hill giant was gradually formed. Looks like I can only rush forward. Hope it's not that old demon. Qin Mu gave a command, and the dragon Qilin immediately sprinted forward. The hill beneath their feet had already stood up, and the fire clouds under the dragon Qilin's feet blazed as he ran frantically down the arm of the hill giant. The giant turned its body and swung the other huge arm toward them. The dragon Qilin leaped into the sky, and a world-shattering rumble rang out behind them. The two arms of the hill giant smashed together and broke, which resulted in countless rocks flying away in all directions. Qin Mu turned his head back to take a look and saw that the moment the rocks landed on the ground, they tumbled back at the body of the hill giant as if they had grown legs. Not much later, the two arms grew back. Palace Master, the ultimate arts of your True Heaven Palace are indeed extraordinary, Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. Xiong Xiu gathered her remaining magic power, and her palm smashed backward before rising P. Instantly, a miserable shriek came from the hill giant's body. Green rays flew out the hill that formed the giant, and it vanished without a trace. The giant then also crumbled down, and huge rocks rolled away, returning to the shape of a hill. This spell is remarkable. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he asked, "Can you teach me?" Xiong Xiu hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You're the benefactor of us mother and daughter. If you want to learn, I will naturally teach you." Qin Mu smiled and said, "I won't learn from you for nothing. True Heaven Palace is the sacred ground of West Earth, so I will also take out the legacy technique of a sacred ground to exchange with you. But let's leave this place first." While the dragon Qilin sprinted forward, the two white bats circled around, releasing sound waves to hit the experts of True Heaven Palace. "Fatty dragon, faster, faster!" The bats hurried the dragon Qilin. "Shut up!" The dragon Qilin went into a fury and shouted back, "I'm already doing my best." Blazing flames came from his body that grew larger and larger, transforming in 120 yards behemoth. When he sprinted, he was as fast as lightning. In a few breaths' time, he crossed the mountain in front of them and came to the lake where the white bats said numerous girls were bathing. This lake was extremely clear, like a transparent jewel embedded within the mountains. From above, the bottom of the lake, which was dozens of yards deep, could be seen. There were no water plants or fish there. The lake was unimaginably clean. Trees were surrounding the huge lake in an orderly manner, while white cloths and pants hung on their branches. On the ground, there were embroidered shoes with white soles and brightly colored peonies at the front. The sounds of girls laughing and playing in the lake reached the group, along with melodious songs. It was as if this place was a paradise in the mortal world. The dragon Qilin barged into this place and got shocked. He didn't dare to break the serene atmosphere here, so he shouted out loudly, "Maidens in the lake, come to shore quickly!" "Ah!" The girls in the lake all cried out in astonishment when they saw this behemoth barging in, while some of the more daring ones raised their fair arms and chuckled. "Big fella, come down and play." Qin Mu looked at the girls in the lake, and his face turned ashen. He hurried the dragon Qilin. "Fatty dragon, it's indeed that old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge. Go quickly. Go, we have to go around it." He wasn't scared of you Buchuan and the rest, but he was scared of that root demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge, the old demon that Heavenly Saint Cult had suppressed for a long time. The old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge? The dragon Qilin jumped in shock, and all the dragon scales on his body stood up, nearly pricking Xiong Qi's feet. He immediately went around the lake and sprinted frantically in a straight line, his speed far surpassing what it was before. The mountain ridge behind them rumbled in the meantime, and mountain rocks flew in all directions. They came tumbling down from the top of the mountain, and it was obvious that it was Yu Buochuan leading the experts of True Heaven Palace to transform this mountain into a giant to attack them. This mountain was much higher than the hill before, so if it transformed into a giant, it would be quite easy for it to catch up to the group. At that moment, the elegant mountain suddenly crumbled and countless white skeletons rolled out from within it. Among them, there were both beast and human skeletons that piled up into a mountain of their own. There were so many of them that nearly the entire mountain had been hollowed out to hide them. This sight made Yu Buochuan and the rest who were in the back flabbergasted. What thing could eat so many people and strange beasts? Yu Buochuan couldn't bother to think about it though and said sternly, "There are spirits and bones, so execute the secret arts to kill Nai Kuei." Everyone cast their spells, and countless bones crawled rapidly to form a white giant that was as tall as a mountain and which strode toward the lake for the shortest path toward the group. Yu Buochuan and the rest rose into the sky and landed on the white bone giant. Some women that were bathing in the lake couldn't avoid the giant's feet in time and got crushed to death. Yu Buochuan and the rest controlled the white bone giant to cross the lake in the chase after the dragon Qilin, who was sprinting frantically around the shore. At this moment, the water of the lake churned as several hundred women flew out into midair. Behind them were pitch-black tentacles, and they all shrieked in unison, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master! Pack, pack, pack!" Loud snapping sounds rang out continuously as the white bone giant got entrapped by the pitch-black tentacles. With a tight squeeze, the giant crumbled into pieces and countless shattered bones flew off in all directions. Over a dozen divine arts practitioners on Six Directions realm couldn't avoid them due to their low cultivation and got pierced through and fell into the water. Those with a slightly stronger cultivation also didn't have it easy defending against the shattered bones that came shooting over, each and every one of them vomiting blood from the impact. When divine arts practitioners that fell into the water tried to struggle out, the water of the lake started to bubble as countless pitch-black things that were like huge pythons swam over and coiled around them to pull them to the bottom of the lake. Yu Buochuan and the rest were dumbstruck. They hurriedly flew into the air to escape the lake. The peaceful scenery had suddenly become incomparably bustling. Naked women with tentacles kept coming from the lake and grabbing people to drag them into the depths. Some people immediately executed the divine arts of True Heaven Palace to try to control these strange roots. True Heaven Palace believed in all things having spirits and souls, so their divine arts could control all things no matter if they had life or not. All things could be controlled to transform into offensive attacks. Yet when they encountered such strange roots, their divine arts were completely useless. Over a dozen people got caught by the women on the roots, their life and death unknown as they got dragged into the lake. "Heavenly Saint Cult Master, I finally found you." Yu Buochuan and the rest finally flew out of the huge lake and landed on the ground. Before they could even catch their breaths, they saw the huge trees on the shore uproot themselves and run frantically in the direction the dragon Qilin had escaped. Yu Buochuan and the rest were startled and immediately began to run as well. The few strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace that were on Celestial Being Realm immediately unleashed their primordial spirits to execute their divine arts and withstand the attacks of the huge trees. After running for 100 miles away, they finally escaped the attacking range of the weird trees and roots. Everyone let out sighs of relief and slowed down their pace. If they traveled at a steady pace, they wouldn't feel tired even if they covered 1,000 miles. But when they escaped with all their might, 100 miles was enough for them to be out of breath. The dragon Qilin also slowed down his pace as he panted heavily. He wasn't too far away from them. "We should have escaped." Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and said, "The distance that the roots of this root demon can cover is merely 100 miles or so. Wait a minute." His expression became grim when he examined his surroundings. He saw that the vegetation was dense here and the trees created shade. This kind of forest was commonly seen, but as they passed through it, Qin Mu saw plants he'd never seen before. They were large flowers that were the height of a human, their tender buds closed up, but standing tall and upright. 2 large leaves grew on the sides of each stalk. Even though Qin Mu had learned medicinal knowledge from apothecary and could distinguish all kinds of plants and spirit herbs, he had never seen this kind of weird flowers. Yu Buochuan and the rest also barged into this flower forest and frowned when they saw the situation. However, they didn't stop chasing after Qin Mu and the others. Suddenly, a huge flower leisurely sprouted its stamens, and its bud whirled as the petals slowly opened up. The color of those white petals gradually became darker, turning from light pink to pink before turning to bright red. When the flower completely bloomed, the maiden kneeling in the middle of it slowly rose and looked at Qin Mu, giving off a miserable shriek. "Heavenly Saint Cult Master, your Heavenly Saint Cult has made me so miserable." In the flower forest, the huge flowers bloomed one after another, and in the center of every one of them stood a maiden that looked as charming as jade. They all looked at Qin Mu and screeched, "So miserable!" Qin Mu's scalp started to crawl, and he hurried the dragon Qilin. "Fatty dragon, set them on fire! Fu brothers, use your sound waves to attack." The dragon Qilin spewed flames from his mouth while true fire also surrounded his body. The two white bats flew into the air and spat out sound waves. Qin Mu, in the meantime, executed Carefree Sword, and the divine sword swooped to and fro like lightning, slicing the roots that were attached to the buttocks of the women pouncing over. At this time, any other treasure sword would have been useless. Only this divine sword could defend against the roots of Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon. But if it was the true body of the old demon, Qin Mu wasn't certain that even Carefree Sword could defend against it. "The cultivation of this old demon seems to have improved," he said with worry. Whoosh! Countless maidens rose into the air, carrying the flowers and leaves to attack the people that had stepped into their forest. A divine arts practitioner of True Heaven Palace executed a jade tree, and 1,000 roots and branches of the jade tree attacked the maiden, only to see the petals and leaves wrapped around her tightly. That divine arts practitioners was delighted and used the roots and branches of the jade tree to coil around her. However, the flower bud was slippery and escaped with a pop. A stamen then pierced through the head of that divine arts practitioners. Yu Buochuan's expression changed drastically, and he shouted out, "Sacred treasure, please!" The strange beast that looked like a violent ape with horns and was only a foot long jumped off his shoulder and beat its chest with its fists. Its body grew larger and larger before the creature opened its mouth to roar loudly. A treasure overflowing with green light then came out from its mouth. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 323, Poisoner and Divine Physician. What the strange beast had spat out from its mouth was a bead that gave off a green glow. It lit up the surroundings with a lush green shine. However, it wasn't the bead that was glowing, but what inside, which looked like a green dragon swimming around. It was the rays of this green dragon that lit up the surroundings. Xiong Xiu saw the green light, and her complexion changed slightly. She hurriedly turned her head. "The green dragon bead of my True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu turned his head and saw that the perimeter the bead covered had already reached 3 yards. The green dragon in the bead had also become much clearer as it swam happily. The maidens in the flowers that had pounced at Yu Buochuan and the rest got hit by the light, and they lignified, turning into wooden sculptures. With their bodies stiff, they paused in midair. Popping sounds came from them, and green sprouts soon popped out from the lignified bodies. Branches then sprouted out, decorating their hosts with lush flora. The tentacles that were the roots of the root demon had become hardwood and couldn't move at all. Yu Buochuan led everyone forward as the violent ape-strange beast with horns on its head followed closely with the bead held high up. Where the rays of the bead shone, the maidens in the flowers were frozen in all kinds of weird poses, without any two being the same. Green dragon bead? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This bead was a remarkable treasure to actually be able to counter monsters such as the root demon. "The sacred treasure of my True Heaven Palace has been snatched by them." Xiong Xiu sneered and stretched her hand out. The strange beast felt that the green dragon bead flew up and couldn't help becoming astonished. It hurriedly jumped onto it, trying to press it down. The Celestial Being Realm's strong practitioners beside Yu Buochuan also burst forth with their vital qi to grab the green dragon bead, fighting with Xiong Xiu. The green dragon bead then floated in midair, with the two sides in a temporarily into deadlock, as they both wanted to control the sacred treasure. The two white bats immediately changed direction and circled around in the air. Countless fine hairs shot out toward Yu Buchuan and the rest as they tried to help snatch the treasured bead. In the blink of an eye, the two white bats' hairs had fallen off cleanly. They had been refined into unusual treasures and were like needles. If they hit flesh, those fine hairs would become abnormally soft, tunneling into the body and taking their host's life in an instant. The dragon Qilin trembled his body, and the scales on his body that were akin to an incomparably sharp shield whooshed through the air as they sliced toward Yu Buchuan and the rest. The dragon Qilin was instantly but naked, having only some Qilin hair at the tip of his dragon tail and big head. Xiong Shiyu's face lost color, and she immediately said, "Don't make a move!" Before her voice even fell, the fine hairs of the two white bats were touched by the green light of the green dragon bean. It immediately lignified them and all of them fell to the ground. The two white bats wanted to call back their fine hairs, but they lost their connection with them. The two brothers stared with wide eyes at this situation and hugged their shoulders, at a loss. The dragon scales of the dragon Qilin also lignified, turning into wooden shields that dropped onto the floor. The fat dragon was also struck dumb, and his big belly fell to the ground. There had been scales covering it before, so it didn't hang down too much. However, without the scales, the flabs hung down uncontrollably. Cult Master! The dragon Qilin was at a loss and immediately turned to look at Qin Mu, who was on his back. Qin Mu had originally planned to unleash his 8,000 swords over, but after seeing the situation he abandoned that idea. The green dragon bead of True Heaven Palace was strange beyond conjecture. Even though the dragon Qilin's cultivation was not yet at Celestial Being Realm, his strength was no different when compared to those on Celestial Being Realm. His skin and flesh were also very thick. Back at the Battle of Heaven Wave City, when Duqian Devil King had descended and fought fiercely with the Dragon King, the aftermath of the collision had scraped the dragon Qilin's butt, but had only broken the scales, causing no heavy injuries to the dragon Qilin. This showed how strong was the defense of the dragon scales. The abilities of the two white bats were even stronger since they definitely reached the peak of Celestial Being Realm. They would also not use the fine hairs on their bodies recklessly. None of them would have ever expected that their treasures would lignify and lose control just by encountering the green light from the green dragon bead. If Qin Mu's 8,000 swords flew over, Carefree Sword would probably be the only one that wouldn't lignify. The other swords would all turn into wood. Xiong Shiyu grunted as her magic power could no longer fight against Yu Buchuan and the rest. The green dragon bead was about to fly over to Yu Buchuan and the rest when the ground suddenly trembled and countless roots poured out from underground, filling the sky. The roots formed a huge pitch-black wooden callus which wrapped around the green dragon bead before pulling it underground. Xiong Shiyu and Yu Buchuan were caught off guard, and both sides couldn't pull back the green dragon bead in time, letting that root demon snatch it away. Yu Buchuan said sternly, "Green dragon bead is the treasure of my true heaven palace, and sealed inside it is a true soul of a green dragon. This old demon won't be able to swallow it." Suddenly, the ground trembled even more violently, and everyone had a hard time keeping their footing. The ground shook non-stop and was actually rising upward as if there was a behemoth below. Boom! The soil and rocks flew in all directions as vegetation flooded out from underground, lifting them up higher and higher. The dragon Qilin immediately leaped to one side, and a tree crown with a radius of several hectares flooded out, brushing past their bodies. The two white bats hurriedly flew up before remembering that their bodies were still bare. They then immediately used their two hands to cover their lower parts. This caused them to fall straight down and head first into the dense tree. The two white bats were slightly stunned. They saw that the tree was still growing frantically, the tree crown getting larger and larger. The trunk was also becoming taller and taller. Therefore, not long later, the white clouds floated past by the tree crown. The air became cooler and cooler while the sunlight became more and more intense. The two white bats found it difficult to breathe and immediately flew down from the tree crown. This flight was a long journey down as the tree crown was actually incomparably huge and thick. Even though their speed was very fast, they still spent quite some time flying out. Below them was a head-spinning height. Out of the foliage, they saw an incomparably thick tree that was much taller than the mountains around it. The two white bats immediately flew down, but only saw the ground after a while. Rumbling sounds kept coming from the huge tree in the meantime, and every once in a while, countless branches would grow out frantically to form a second, third, and fourth tree crown. The two white bats avoided obstacles repeatedly. At one point, lightning crackled in midair, striking here and there. Rain then slowly started pattering down. When the two white bats landed on the ground, they immediately covered their lower bodies and turned to look around. They didn't see Qin Mu and the rest, only a majestic trunk that was like a mountain blocking their vision. The ground split continuously as roots that were as thick as dragons pushed through. They crackled and spread into the distance. Even some mountains that were far away got tangled by the roots until they were sealed tight. By then, the sunlight was completely covered, so there wasn't much light. The Fu brothers flew onto the trunk and climbed the tree rapidly, searching for Qin Mu and the rest. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the bottom layer of the tree crown and fibrous roots came hanging down from the tree crown. They swung to and fro with huge flower buds. This should be the original body of the root demon, right? Qin Mu said. Fu Yuqiu and Fu Yuchen hurriedly crawled over where they heard his voice and only let out sighs of relief when they saw him, the dragon Qilin, and the rest. They leaped off from the trunk of the tree and used their wings to cover their bodies. Qin Mu raised his head to look at the transformed root demon and was ineffably astonished. He went forward to peel open a huge flower bud hanging down. Inside it, there was a maiden hanging motionlessly with her arms dangling. This maiden opened her eyes weakly and took a look at Qin Mu, saying with a weak breath, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master." Qin Mu closed the maiden's eyes, but she opened them again to stare at him fiercely. Qin Mu went to open other flower buds, and inside all of them were maidens hanging upside down. They were the strange things that Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon had born and weren't independent life forms. These girls were just a part of the root demon's body. The root demon was just a bunch of roots that had absorbed the blood of a god and devil to become a great demon. It didn't have a trunk, but now that it had absorbed the energy of Green Dragon Bead and grew its trunk, it will only be even more terrifying. Qin Mu was worried. "Let us leave this place as soon as possible." The White Bat brothers saw that there was some of their hair on the floor which was no longer in their lignified state and were delighted. They trembled their bodies and pulled their hair back. Noticing it, the dragon Qilin swayed his body and the scales that had returned to normal flew back as well. Xiong Xiu shook her head. In the Green Dragon Bead there was a true soul of a green dragon, and this great demon won't be able to absorb it. It's most likely controlled by the energy in Green Dragon Bead and can't move. As long as we find the Green Dragon Bead that it had swallowed, we will be able to turn the tables and kill Yu Buochuan with his rebels. Xiong Qir was curious. "Mom, if we take out the Green Dragon Bead, will this root demon come back to life?" Xiong Xiu shuddered. Now that the Green Dragon Bead was suppressing the root demon, if they took it, the root demon would recover its mobility and they would be in danger once again. Suddenly, a voice spoke. "Young master, the Green Dragon Bead is here." Qin Mu's expression changed drastically. "Crap, we can't let them dig out the Green Dragon Bead." They looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Buochuan and the rest of the strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace looking at a piece of trunk. It was glowing with a lush green color, just like jade, lighting up an area of a hectare. It was obvious that Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon had swallowed the Green Dragon Bead, and the terrifying energy within it had instantly lignified it, causing the trunk to grow out from the roots and pressing them down. The roots had also turned stiff and were unable to move. "Don't take out the Green Dragon Bead. If you do it, the great demon will regain its mobility and none of us will live." After saying this, Yu Buochuan looked toward Qin Mu and the rest. He frowned slightly while the people beside him waited while protecting him. Qin Mu smiled. "Fellow senior brothers, how do you do? Can you still use the divine arts of True Heaven Palace here? If you can't, I can only send all of you on your way." Yu Buochuan's body suddenly flashed and came to the origin of the green light. He stretched his hand and reached into the trunk of the tree with a sneer. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, if I'm to die, we will all die together. Such fragrance. What's the smell? Just as he said this, the world started spinning for him and he collapsed. The smell of lost fragrance. Qin Mu answered while beaming. Thud. Thud. The people of True Heaven Palace collapsed to the ground, with only the 3 experts of Celestial Being Realm able to barely endure it. However, their faces were all flushed and with lost fragrance suppressing their cultivation. There wasn't much magic power they could mobilize. Suddenly, there was the voice of a woman, and she was speaking while laughing. Lost fragrance, it's a kind of anesthetic, right? Let me take a whiff. Xiong Xiu's expression changed drastically, while the 3 strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm were delighted. Poisoner. Mu Yingxue. Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and saw a black-clothed woman with gold and silver accessories and a jade bead crown on her head. When she walked past the women hanging from the branches, they would wither and turn into a pile of ashes. Qin Mu took out a jade bottle and threw it over with a smile. It's an anesthetic. Take a whiff and see. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 324. People of talent appreciate one another. That woman in black was none other than Poisoner Mu Yingxue of True Heaven Palace. She wasn't old and her body emanated the vigor of youth from under her black clothes. Her skin was fair, contrasting well with the black clothes, and its whiter than snow tenderness suited her name well. She caught the jade bottle, and only then did Qin Mu notice the black silk gloves that were very thin yet could protect her skin from coming into contact with the air. That pair of gloves couldn't be any ordinary object. People who were used to making poison needed to be very careful to keep themselves from coming into contact with toxic substances. Qin Mu was certain that those black silk gloves didn't have the quality of silk, but instead were airtight. The woman's chest was not moving up and down as she was relying on the pores of her skin to breathe in and out so that she wouldn't be poisoned. It was obvious that her abilities didn't rely on her cultivation or spirit weapons, but her poison. The cultivation realm was never the standard to measure apothecary's abilities. Even though his cultivation realm was very low, he could even kill a god with his poison. Mu Yingxue took a look at the jade bottle, but she didn't smell the lost fragrance within it. Instead, she revealed her arm and let her skin take a whiff. She absorbed a tiny amount and instantly felt half of her arm go numb, losing its sense of touch. What a wonderful drug! Her eyes lit up, and she stuffed the jade bottle before throwing it back to Qin Mu while praising him. Even though it can't paralyze strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm, it can restrict their mobility. A remarkable anesthetic. Qin Mu flipped his palm and vital qi surged out, catching the jade bottle. He didn't let it come into contact with his hand, but instead took out a 3-legged jade-eyed toad from his Taotai sack. That toad opened its mouth and swallowed the jade bottle, closed its mouth, then spat the jade bottle out. After that, Qin Mu placed it down, and the creature hopped toward Mu Yingxue. Xiong Xiu and the rest were staring blankly. They knew that Qin Mu had gathered herbs in the basin, but they didn't know when he'd caught a jade-eyed toad to put it in his Taotai sack. Big Sister Mu's poison is also extraordinary, Qin Mu praised. However, your poison is only minor and unqualified to take place in the higher circles, much less to be called unrivaled in the world. Mu Yingxue's eyes were snow-bright as she watched the jade-eyed toad hopping over. She gave a gentle flick with her finger, and a strand of vital qi thread transformed into a flying insect that flew here and there. The 3-legged toad swung its tongue out and caught that flying insect before croaking 2 times. Then, it swelled up like a balloon and became as huge as a cow. Qin Mu took out a spirit pill and gently sliced it through the center. Once it split open, buzzing sounds could be heard coming from within. The pill was actually empty with only a mosquito inside. That mosquito vibrated its wings to fly onto the back of the toad and lie down there. Not long later, the toad became smaller and smaller while that mosquito became larger and larger. The stomach of the mosquito was like a huge water bag, but inside it was blood, which was not fresh red but instead lush green. By the time the mosquito had its fill, the 3-legged toad had returned to normal and was hopping around once again. It swung its tongue at the huge mosquito, but since it was too small, it couldn't swallow it. Mu Yingxue was astonished. Raising insects in spirit pills? Interesting. She bared her arms and revealed her delicate white skin. The mosquito immediately went forward to sting her arm, but just as it pierced her skin, that mosquito shrunk as if it was dehydrated, and its color also changed. It turned red as it turned and flew back toward Qin Mu while blazing with flames. Qin Mu's pupils contracted, and he took out some spirit pills from his Taotai sack. These pills were of different sizes, and their colors were also all different. Qin Mu rapidly sliced them into cubes and took some of each according to ratios known to him alone. With a ball of flame coming out from his palm, he fused different medicinal energies, transforming them into another kind of pill. He opened his mouth to swallow this pill and hastened the medicinal energy while rolling up his sleeves. After sucking his blood, the mosquito returned back to its original color. It then flew leisurely back to Mu Yingxue. She sneered at him. "You didn't poison it?" Qin Mu's nose suddenly grew by a huge chunk, and his nostrils flared upwards, making him incomparably hideous. With a chuckle, he said, "If I didn't poison it, how would it have flown toward you? By following your scent." Mu Yingxue frowned slightly and stared at the mosquito that was flying over, trying to distinguish what poison Qin Mu had applied. After a moment, she took out a few kinds of herbs from her sleeves and dispensed them nimbly. She then spread them on her arm and let the mosquito sting her. Once it did so, Mu Yingxue's hair began to grow frantically. In an instant, it went in all directions, making her look like a porcupine. Poof! A soft pop sounded out, and Mu Yingxue felt that her buttocks were itchy. A bushy tail that reached the ground had grown out and burst open her pants. Mu Yingxue's complexion turned slightly dark. The mosquito had absorbed her blood, and the toxicity in its body had changed, making it lose interest in her. With a buzz, it flew back toward Qin Mu. His expression changed slightly, and he took out dozens of spirits pills from his Taotai sack, slicing and mixing them up. When the mosquito flew over, he had already finished making a new spirit pill. Once he consumed it, his face returned back to normal. The mosquito stung him and flew up by itself again. Meanwhile, rumbles came from Qin Mu's body that sounded like thunder. Bolts of lightning then came from the sky and struck him, tearing him in the blink of an eye. Mu Yingxue had been refining poisonous herbs during that time and had refined a small bottle of a drug. She raised her head and drank it all, making her fine black hair that had spread out in all directions to fall off, not a strand left. The tail at her buttocks also fell off. The woman lifted her pants up with a black face, then stretched out her arm to let the mosquito sting it. The next moment, she grunted and collapsed on the floor face first. Crackling sounds came from underneath her as she grew 8 legs all over her body, which resulted in her looking like a hairy spider. "Your poison is very intense," Mu Yingxue screeched in anger. "Try my poison now." The mosquito flew back toward Qin Mu, and his expression changed drastically. He immediately prescribed new medicine for himself to undo the cold poison while retorting sternly, "Do you think I'm scared of you?" The two of them pitting poison against each other was a new sight, making Xiong Shiyu, Xiong Cheer, and the rest watch with flabbergasted expressions. When the two had first clashed, the poison had been on the jade bottle, so Qin Mu had used the 3-legged toad to detox it while changing the toxicity at the same time. The 3-legged frog was affected by the toxin and thought that Mu Yingxue was a delicious food. Thus it hopped towards her with highly toxic poison in its belly. Mu Yingxue then used her vital qi to transform into an insect who had another kind of toxic inside it. When the toad ate that insect, the toxicity in its body had transformed again. Qin Mu then released the unusual mosquito he had captured in the basin of West Heaven Palace, borrowing its primitive toxicity to absorb the blood of the toad. This caused an unusual change, making it sting Mu Yingxue and poison her. After Mu Yingxue detoxed the poison, she planted poison in the flying mosquito to make it sting Qin Mu, testing his abilities. The two of them exchanged blows and exhausted all their means. With every move, they had to undo the poison of the other side, ensure that the unusual mosquito wasn't poisoned to death, and also attempt their best to poison the opponent. This required extremely high attainments in making poison and detoxification. If they were careless and didn't poison the other side, they might get poisoned by their own creation. Qin Mu looked at the mosquito flying over and frowned. He raised his hand and said, "Wait a minute. Your poison refining ability is similar to mine, so since that we want to determine who's the winner, why should we poison ourselves?" Mu Yingxue was also slightly unable to take it. When she heard that, she immediately looked at Xiong Shiyu and the rest with a smile. "In that case, you shall poison Yu Buchuan and I will detox his poison. Then I will poison Nai Kuei and you will detox it. Don't worry, Yu Buchuan is now the little young master of True Heaven Palace, so his position currently isn't any lower than that of Nai Kuei." The expression of Xiong Shiyu and the rest changed drastically, and even Yu Buchuan, who was lying motionlessly on the floor, cried out silently in dismay. The two who pitted poison against each other dazzled his eyes. Even the famous cold poison from poisoner Mu Yingxue was used, but she still couldn't do anything to Qin Mu. This showed that his attainments in knowledge regarding poison were no lower than those of Mu Yingxue. To use poison on me, if the poisoner can't undo it, won't I end up dying? He wanted to escape, but the anesthetic was not yet undone and his soul was still paralyzed. Qin Mu laughed. Poisoning oneself is not considered an ability. You and I don't have weak attainments in the poison path, so we should seek a stronger target. Only poisoning the strongest existence to death can be considered an ability. Mu Yingxue revealed a curious expression, itching to start. Nai Kuei is one of the strongest existences in True Heaven Palace, and her cultivation was shaved off by my coiling silk. So is my poison path still not strong enough? Qin Mu patted the huge tree beside him and smiled. That is not considered anything. If we are to compete with poison, let us choose this great demon to fight. It is a root demon that had absorbed blood from a god and a devil, and so possessing both the bloodline of a god and devil. With this power, it is extremely extraordinary. If you want to poison it, you will have to make the toxicity suppress the blood of a god and devil, to have the means to poison gods and devils. Mu Yingxue's eyes instantly lit up. She examined the huge tree that had transformed from the root demon, and her heart began to stir. Practitioners of poison view poisoning gods and devils as their ultimate goal, so to poison a strong practitioner of Divine Bridge Realm is indeed not considered an ability. Alright, I will agree with you. You and I, whoever can poison this root demon will be the winner. A strong practitioner on Celestial Being Realm showed a look of despair and struggled to move forward. Poisoner. There are important matters at hand. Mu Yingxue gave him a glance and sneered. I'm not interested in the fight over authority within True Heaven Palace. In my eyes, poison is the important manner. I and this little brother appreciate each other, so we naturally have to fight to our heart's content. This is so we won't let down what we had learned our entire lives. Suddenly, everyone collapsed onto the floor, and even the dragon Qilin, Xiong Shiyu, and the two white bats crumbled to the ground. The three strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm also fainted from the drug. Mu Yingxue looked at Qin Mu and said firmly, "It's rare for Yingxue to meet such a Dao friend, so we must play to our heart's content today. I didn't bring enough spirit herbs, so I need to go gather herbs in Great Ruins. 2 days later, you and I shall meet under this huge tree and execute all our methods." Qin Mu sighed. All right. After he said that, he placed a jade bottle that was half open. For the next 2 days, lost fragrance would leak out continuously so no one would be able to come close to this place. The two of them made their moves and headed to other places to find spirit herbs, abandoning the dragon Qilin, Xiong Shiyu, and the rest. After they left, the huge tree began to struggle in an attempt to move, wanting to pull its roots out to take this chance to escape. But what could it do when it was fixed in place by the green dragon bead? It was unable to pull away even an inch. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 325. Poisoning the Root Demon. The night descended and darkness came surging forth in all directions. But when it came to the huge tree, there were divine lights shining in its surroundings. This was due to the root demon wishing to avoid the invasion of the darkness and making quite an effort to remain safe. It had snatched god statues from many other places to protect itself. The area which the roots could cover was vast, but the original body was only a lump of roots. During the day, they would be spread out in all directions, transforming into women to attract praise to its doorstep. But at night, they would all be retracted to hide in the area guarded by the god statue's divine light. The White Bat brothers, the Dragon Qilin, Xiong Xiu, and Xiong Cheer were all near the roots, in the area covered by the light, so they were safe for the night. However, all of them were either poisoned or paralyzed by lost fragrance, so they were unable to move. They could only wait quietly for the morning to come. Ghostly wails came from the outside while huge shadows moved in the darkness. Devil language rang continuously as if whispered by the ears. Some of the god statues had suddenly revived and were saying words that the people of current times couldn't understand. Light burst forth in the darkness, and it suddenly retreated, revealing a world with verdant hills and limpid water. The great ruins overlapped with the other world, and there were people there examining the darkness in great ruins with curiosity. At another moment, a deadly quiet world which was gray and hazy, without any signs of life, suddenly appeared in the surroundings. A night of bizarre encounters pushed the hearts of everyone into their mouths. When the sun finally rose in the sky, the Dragon Qilin lay on his back with his 4 legs raised up. He had suffered from Mu Yingshua's poison, but he could still mutter, "Cult Master haven't fed me today." Another day passed by and evening came. Qin Mu rushed back from outside covered in dust. He refined a drug while walking. He had also gathered some fine jade, which he refined into an 8 trigrams 5 phases furnace, which was much more complicated and intricate than the sealed furnace in Imperial College. Since he was a professional in crafting artifacts, crafting such a furnace wasn't difficult for him. When Qin Mu came to the bottom of the tree, he was still refining pills and medicines. A sealed furnace would prevent poisonous gas from leaking out. His methods were different from the past. Ever since he had competed with Little Poison King, he had improved a lot in the path of refining poison. This time, he used the basic method of refining simple poison pills. Just like how sword techniques had 14 basic sword forms, refining poison also had 1024 basic poison pills. By arranging them in different groups, a different kind of poison would be concocted. The dosage of each kind of poison pill was different, and with different ways of matching them, the poison achieved would also be different. Besides these, he also refined numerous basic supplement spirit pills to boost medicinal energy. They could raise the power of a poison by dozens of times. After he finished refining the basic poison and supplement pills, he took out a few seeds and over a dozen insect eggs. He planted the seeds under the tree and used Earth Aeon creation technique and Spirit creation technique to hasten the growth, growing them into spirit herbs. At the same time, he had the insect eggs hatch and numerous little insects crawled out. Qin Mu fed them supplements and made them plump from all the feeding. He then placed them onto the spirit medicines to gnaw on them, making their toxicity increase. Despite his medicinal knowledge being close to reaching perfection, Apothecary had never purposely imparted poison techniques to Qin Mu. He had learned to fuse the poison path with his medical skill from Little Poison King Fu Yuanqing. Qin Mu let the venomous insects kill and swallow each other until only one insect king was left. He then concocted different poison pills with all kinds of high poisonous pills to feed to it. Before the sky turned dark, Mu Yingxue made her way back. This woman was riding a white elephant, and it walked over at a leisurely pace. Beside the white elephant were numerous flowers and herbs, as well as birds and animals. Qin Mu was stunned when he saw flowers, herbs, birds, animals, and even insects following the woman. All of them seemed to be inseparable. All things have spirits, and poisonous substances also have spirits. The method she used to gather herbs is much superior to mine, to actually make the poisonous herbs follow her by themselves. This was indeed a great foe with brilliant attainments in the poison path. Qin Mu could feel the pressure. Victory or defeat wasn't determined in the competition 2 days earlier as both of them had suffered losses. However, this time it might be a real competition. Mu Yingxue came to the bottom of the tree, and the flowers, herbs, birds, animals, and insects followed right after. The hair of everyone who was lying under the tree stood up on end as they looked at Qin Mu and Mu Yingxue with eyes filled with fear. Poisonous substances were common to Qin Mu and Mu Yingxue, but to others they were dangers that they wanted to avoid at any cost. Mu Yingxue immediately took care of her herbs and executed her own technique. The poisonous substances grew by themselves until their toxicity was perfected. At that moment, they would pluck off their most toxic part, offering it to her. This girl was very serious and did everything meticulously, grooming her poison with single-minded devotion. Her poison was slightly different from Middle-earth's poison. It mainly targeted the vital qi, which was the beginning of a person's qi. When there was not enough of it, the body would empty out and the blood would become weak, along with their spirit and appearance. If the vital qi was completely emptied out, the person would die. It was the same for people who cultivated. Her poison knowledge chased after the origin of life with the intention to poison it to death. Her plan was brilliant. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows, then focused on refining his poison with similar single-minded devotion. The two of them competed with each other and refined diligently throughout the night while the huge tree beside them shivered. The trunk swayed for an entire night, but it still couldn't manage to break free. Light finally broke through the sky, and Qin Mu finished his poison. Mu Yingxue also straightened her back, and in both of their hands was a small jug. The two people looked at each other. What poison has Big Sister refined? Qin Mu asked curiously. Mu Yingxue didn't open her jug, but smiled. Your poison is very toxic, but your mouth is as sweet as honey, warming my heart. My poison has no prescription since it's a new one that I created to target the blood of a god and devil. I haven't named it yet. My poison has the benefit of dissolving the blood of gods and devils, destroying the origin of the vital qi. After consuming it, the vital qi will be depleted in 3/4 of an hour, eliminating the spirit and scattering the vital qi, killing the host. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he said, Big Sister, since your poison doesn't have a name, let me help you name it. Let's call it Spirit Eliminating 3 Wonders Powder. How about it? Mu Yingxue was extremely delighted and looked at him happily while praising, Good little brother, I didn't expect you to be so erudite. If it was me, I wouldn't have thought of such a nice name. What kind of poison did you make? Qin Mu patted his jug and smiled. My poison is also different from usual. My master never taught me any prescriptions for poison and only taught me medicinal knowledge. I learned the skill of refining poison from my senior brother. One benefit of this poison is that it can reverse the yin and yang, messing up the 5 phases. A great supplement is also a great poison. Once a great supplement is used to nourish a great poison, the corporeal body and primordial spirit will be spoiled. If my poison is consumed, the body will be the first to break, followed by the spirit. My poison has also fused the shaman poison of Roland's Golden Palace, which can disperse the soul, so it breaks 3 things. Why don't we call it 3-break powder then? Even though the name doesn't sound nice, it suits it well, said Mu Yingxue. Qin Mu smiled and said, Big Sister's name is interesting as well. Let's call it 3-break powder. The people lying on the floor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These two people were clearly foes in a life and death battle to poison each other and defeat the other's poison path. Yet there they were, flattering each other, calling each other Big Sister and Little Brother, and looking affectionate. Besides, hearing them praise their poison, it was as if they were talking about some sacred medicine that could make them gods after consuming it. Good sister, will you poison it first, or shall I poison it first? Qin Mu asked. Mu Yingxue hesitated. Poisoning first and poisoning later had its own problems. Once the first person poisoned the root demon, even if the poison didn't kill the creature, it could still cause major damage to its vitality, allowing the next person to gain an advantage. However, being the first to poison would give the person the ability to seize a key moment. If the root demon was poisoned to death, that person would win and the other party could only admit defeat. Mu Yingxue was slightly troubled. Qin Mu caught her expression and opened his jug with a smile. How about I go first? He opened his jug and a wisp of black smoke floated out. A venomous insect came from within, rays of light coming from its body. The little thing looked like a spider, but it wasn't a spider. It had 8 claws, a long body, a stomach of a wasp, and 8 eyes that were all tightly shut. This wasn't a true venomous insect, but a vision transformed from the toxicity. It looked like a world-shaking poison would erupt from it the moment the venomous insect opened its eyes. Mu Yingxue took a glance and shuddered. She then immediately said, "Let me go first." Qin Mu moved back a step, and Mu Yingxue went forward to open her jar. A wisp of green smoke floated out, and the spirit-eliminating 3 wonders powder was revealed to be a green seed. Mu Yingxue executed her magic power, and the green seed flew into the huge tree with a whoosh before vanishing. The both of them could faintly see the seeds sprouting in the tree and growing rapidly. Mu Yingxue cast her spell to catalyze all the toxicity in spirit-eliminating 3 wonders powder, and the ground suddenly trembled. The root demon seemed to have felt immense pain, which made its trunk tremble endlessly. The roots that were as thick as dragons snapped and decomposed, causing miserable shrieks to come from the flower buds. The women flailed in all directions as the flowers withered. Numerous buds fell to the ground while the women inside them became charred bits. In the sky above, the first layer of the tree crown suddenly crumbled with a world-shaking rumble. It crashed down on a mountain nearby, splitting its peak. Great poison! Great drug! Qin Mu sighed in astonishment. Yet Mu Yingxue frowned slightly. Even though the first layer of the tree crown had crumbled and the tree bark looked like it was withering, there was something that was out of her expectations, and it was the green dragon bead. The root demon had swallowed the green dragon bead. This might have suppressed its mobility, but it also provided the root demon with incomparable vitality. The power contained in the blood of a god and a devil also surpassed her expectations. Her spirit-eliminating 3 wonders powder might not be able to poison this root demon to death. Mu Yingxue waited for 2 hours until the root demon gradually stopped struggling. Roots started to grow once more, and the tree crown also grew out. The withered bark fell off while new ones replaced it. "I've lost." Mu Yingxue's expression turned dim, and she shook her head. Qin Mu went forward and smiled. "I also might not be able to win." His vital qi burst forth, forming a sacrificial altar. He then placed the jug at the center and cast his spell. The insect on the altar became bigger and bigger. With a sudden whoosh, it flew up and clung to the tree before seeping into it. Qin Mu's hair fluttered as he moved around while casting his spell. His 3-break poison used shaman poison, so he had to cast the spell to move it. The root demon did not react for a time. Then the toxicity erupted, and the huge tree rumbled. Snapping sounds rang out continuously, and countless wooden shards fell from the sky, resulting in a rain of wood. The ground became akin to a boiling pot as countless roots jumped out of the ground like huge snakes, wriggling in the air. Boom! The roots that had flown out from the soil formed a huge black ball while withering and breaking into pieces. The black wood that scattered all over the ground piled up to form a huge mountain. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 326. Yearn Most 4. Mu Yingxue stood with a dazed expression. A huge piece of wood came flying down, crashing down toward her. However, she forgot to dodge, so Qin Mu pounced over and dragged her away. Just as they left, that piece of huge wood landed, and the airwave threw the 2 of them away. Soon after, they came to a halt, and Qin Mu placed the woman down. When he turned his head back to have a look at where she had stood earlier, he saw a huge pit where the huge piece of wood had crashed. The soil and rocks had flown in all directions. Mu Yingxue had yet to recover from her shock when she suddenly came to her senses. She took out a couple jade bottles and said in a hurry, "There's poison on my body, so you might have gotten poisoned when you carried me." "No need." Qin Mu quickly matched a few antidotes to detox himself. The 2 of them looked around, unable to help the slight numbness that entered their hearts. The valleys in the surroundings had all piled up with black wood, which accumulated into mountains. Under their feet were the roots of the root demon. They were countless as they lay twisted and motionless. Qin Mu then immediately looked toward the dragon Qilin and the rest. When the unimaginably huge tree collapsed, they who were at the roots were lucky to not end up injured or buried. "You've won." Mu Yingxue's expression turned dim as she said dejectedly, "The number 1 poisoner of West Earth still cannot compare to a little brother from Great Ruins. I'm ashamed to be the number 1 in West Earth." Qin Mu shook his head and said, You don't have to be sad since I've picked up a bargain this time. There's Roland's Golden Palace's shaman poison in my poison, and in addition, you had poisoned the root demon beforehand and injured its vitality. Only then was I able to poison it to death. It had swallowed the green dragon bead and could restore its vitality at any time, so I was not of any help, Mu Yingxue said in a bleak voice. Actually, I'm not that proficient in poison and am more skilled in curing illnesses and saving people. Furthermore, I'm not just anybody. My reputation is quite loud, Qin Mu explained in consolation. Mu Yingxue suffered another blow from this. He wasn't proficient yet, he had still defeated her? You might as well not console me, she said coldly. Now that you have one, how are you going to deal with me? Qin Mu was bewildered and shook his head. Why do I have to deal with you? I'm very happy that the two of us got to compete and in the process got rid of this strong foe that is the root demon. We are both from the same path, so exchanging pointers is something we should do. Mu Yingxue stared at him with her shiny black eyes, then suddenly tiptoed to kiss him on the lips. She then stuffed a small bag in his hands and turned to leave while chuckling. I've poisoned you now with the poison of yearning. If you go to West Earth, don't forget to find me, but don't walk through the front door. You need to flip in through the window. Qin Mu stared blankly, feeling that the lips of the girl had been wet, soft, and fragrant. His head was slightly blank. However, this wasn't due to poison. As a young divine physician from Eternal Peace Empire, Qin Mu knew his body like the back of his hand, so he was calmly analyzing his condition. These are the symptoms of lack of blood to the brain. When I got kissed by her, my heart stopped for a beat, causing the brain to have no blood flow, so my mind is all blank. Mu Yingxue went straight for the dragon Qilin, Xiong Shiyu, and the rest, so the surprised Qin Mu hurriedly gave chase. The green dragon bead had popped out from the root demon's body when it crumbled and landed in the middle of everyone. Xiong Shiyu, this Nai Kuei of True Heaven Palace, was struggling with all her might to move her body toward it. The two white bats were also crawling over. The poison in their bodies that had been planted by Mu Yingxue had gradually faded away, so they could move once again. On the other side, the effects of lost fragrance on Yu Buochuan and the rest were also fading away. Thus, they were also crawling toward the green dragon bead, trying to grab it before the other side could do it. The dragon Qilin crawled the fastest. This behemoth with an obese body was very lazy and would only move when fire was burning his buttocks. But at this moment, he looked like he had to get this green dragon bead no matter what. He forced himself forward with great effort, surpassing the rest. However, his endurance was lousy, and he began panting for breath after crawling for a short while. His speed then gradually slowed down. The two groups of people were getting closer and closer to the green dragon bead. An expert on celestial being realm was the closest to it, so he stretched his hand out, trying to grab it. The dragon Qilin saw the situation and immediately opened his mouth to stretch out his tongue. His tongue grew longer and longer, getting closer to the green dragon bead. From the looks of it, he was going to sweep it up. When Mu Yingxue came to this place, Qin Mu was a step late. Yet he waved his hand and his vital qi flew out, sweeping the green dragon bead up. Mu Yingxue didn't make a move to snatch it, but instead swept her sleeves to collect Yu Buochuan and the rest, sending them to the back of the white elephant. The woman in black stamped her feet, and her body floated upward to stand on the nose of the huge white elephant that was raised up. She waved at Qin Mu. The master of Yu family is my benefactor, so I'm bringing them as well. The young man that I yearn most for, come to West Earth as soon as possible. Qin Mu was in a daze. He waved back at her with a weird emotion in his heart. The small bag that Mu Yingxue stuffed into his hand wasn't big, similar to a scented bag. However, it was black. On the side of it, a pair of mandarin ducks swimming beside a lotus with their necks together were embroidered in a gold thread. Qin Mu opened the scented bag to find a handful of bright red beans. They were like ripe apples but way smaller. The red bean grows in southern lands, their slender tendrils twining together in spring. Xiong Shiyu stumbled to her feet and looked at the red beans in his hand while chanting softly, "Gather for me some more I pray, of fond yearning is this the sign. Cult Master Qin, Poisoner is inviting you for a visiting marriage." Qin Mu sniffed the red beans and shook his head. There is poison in the red beans, so she is probably trying to poison me. Could it really be yearning poison? That's right. She kissed me on the lips. Hers was a little wet, so there has to have been some kind of medicine there that once fused with the red beans becomes deadly. Yes, that must be the case. Xiong Xiu was flabbergasted. This previous palace master of True Heaven Palace stared at the cult master of Heavenly Saint Cult with shiny black eyes, her heart full of doubt. Isn't red beans used to express yearning and love? How did this great cult master Qin link it to poison? Even suspecting Mu Yingxue of trying to poison him, she finally realized that this great cult master Qin had some misunderstandings in regards to the feelings between men and women. Furthermore, they were quite severe. He seems to have been taught wrongly by someone, Xiong Xiu thought to herself. However, Qin Mu still put the poisonous red beans back into the black silk-scented bag and put it away with care, making Xiong Xiu feel that he wasn't beyond redemption. Qin Mu raised the green dragon bead up and examined it. He saw that the color of the green dragon's body was that of jade, having a sparkling and translucent feeling to it. The whiskers were also green in color as if it was a jade dragon. The soul happily swam around in the bead. This was the dragon soul of a true dragon, not a mixed breed like the hen dragon, dragon Qilin, or the green bull. Instead, it was a pure-blooded green dragon whose abnormally powerful divine energy Qin Mu could feel even from within the bead. Even though the root demon had absorbed part of the energy in the green dragon bead, this item seemed to be able to continuously absorb the vital qi lingering in nature, replenishing itself. It was very strange. Truly a great treasure. Could the dragon soul inside belong to a dragon god? Qin Mu circulated his Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and his vital qi automatically transformed into green dragon vital qi. He then tried to mobilize the energy in the green dragon bead, but he soon realized that he couldn't do it. This puzzled him, and he said, I guess only by using the unique technique of True Heaven Palace could I be able to control the energy of the green dragon bead. My green dragon vital qi is probably just food for the green dragon soul. To use the power of the green dragon bead, he would need to communicate with the green dragon soul inside. To do it, the technique of all things having spirit and soul might be the only way. The sacred ground of West Earth is pretty remarkable, he exclaimed to himself. The poison in the dragon Qilin's body had decreased quite a bit, and he could finally stand up. He then immediately swung his long tail to and fro, raising dust behind him as he shouted, Cult Master, give me the bead. Qin Mu didn't pay attention to him and threw the green dragon bead to Xiong Qiu, that little girl, with a smile. For you to play. Xiong Qiu caught the green dragon bead and smiled sweetly. Thank you, big brother. The dragon Qilin's saliva flowed down continuously, and he wagged his tail at Xiong Qiu. Big sister, let me play with the bead. Don't worry, I won't eat it, I promise you. Qin Mu immediately fetched a couple jade bottles to collect the dragon saliva and thought to himself, I should collect a few more bottles to sell in the capital city so I would have money. Right, I'll have to return to the village first to fetch Linger back. She's much better at managing finances than me. He collected over a dozen bottles until Xiong Qiu placed the green dragon bead into her undergarment. Only then did the dragon Qilin stop drooling. Qin Mu threw a glance at the little girl. Even though Xiong Qiu was still small, she was very intelligent. She took out the green dragon bead again, and the dragon Qilin's tail began to swing again, his saliva flowing down like a waterfall once more. After collecting over 20 bottles of dragon saliva, Qin Mu was finally satisfied. He was afraid that the quality would be affected if too much flowed out, so he signaled for Xiong Qiu to put away the green dragon bead. The two white bats and Xiong Xiu had also recovered their strength, so Qin Mu brought them to head east. Xiong Xiu had been too deeply poisoned. If it was something simple, the toxicity would be mild and curing her would be very easy. However, the coiling poison had penetrated deep into her divine treasures, so it was difficult to remove it. To others, this could be considered beyond cure, but Qin Mu felt that she was still savable. He searched for spirit herbs throughout the journey to refine spirit pills, and after using 10 kinds of spirit pills and changing the prescription 10 times, he finally got rid of the coiling poison in her spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, and 7 stars divine treasure. After walking for over 10 days, they didn't encounter Yu Buochuan or any of his people. It was probably because the green dragon bead had been snatched away, so they felt that they weren't a match for Qin Mu and the rest anymore. Because of that, they should have gone back to West Earth for reinforcement. Suddenly, the sound of bubbling water came from the front, and Qin Mu's eyes lit up as he smiled. We have reached the source of surging river. Not long later, they saw steam coming from above a cliff while below it was a several thousand feet deep drop. Xiong Xiu and the rest immediately looked around and saw great ruins stretching from the west to the east from where the land had suddenly broken off, forming a natural moat spanning thousands of miles from north to south. The natural moat had split Great Ruins into two, and the West Great Ruins was thousands of feet higher than East Great Ruins. What kind of power could have formed these sections? Xiong Xiu muttered. A huge earthquake. There was no expression in Qin Mu's face as he spoke. An unimaginable earthquake. Xiong Xiu couldn't help shuddering. Qin Mu jumped down from the cliff, and his feet landed on air, walking down step by step. Xiong Xiu brought her daughter to catch up, and when they reached the middle of the cliff, they saw that the first stream merged with other streams that came pouring down from the sky, forming a huge waterfall. As they went farther down, they saw that the crashing of water had formed a huge pool below. The river poured out from there, but it wasn't wide. Its beginning was only 10 yards wide, but as it continued forward, other rivers flowed into it, speeding up the current and widening the riverbed. Xiong Xiu turned back to take a look and saw that from the natural moat, which was the cliff behind them, there were countless waterfalls pouring down. The flowing water would then gathered below to form a huge river. Surging River. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 327. Echoes of History. They had reached Surging River. Qin Mu examined the surroundings. When Village Chief had brought him to search for Carefree Village, they had come near here, so that village where the messenger of death was guiding the souls shouldn't be too far from this place. It would be a 5 to 6 days journey at most, and then they could return back to disabled elderly village. It was close to the end of the 8th month, so the sun was scorching. With it burning high up in the sky, the road was quite a bumpy one. When Qin Mu had come out with Crown Prince Ling Yushu, it had been the season of spring and now it was already the end of summer. Another season later, he would have to go back to the village for New Year again. All the encounters he'd had on his journey could be considered legends. As they headed down the river, water vapor suddenly blew over on the surface of the river. Pure white fog then sealed it off, preventing them from seeing anything in their surroundings. Qin Mu immediately halted, and the rest also stopped in their footsteps, standing on the river surface motionlessly. Xiong Xiu's heart tightened, and she asked in a low voice, "Monster?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Doesn't look like it. It should be a kind of peculiarity in Great Ruins." At that moment, Carefree Sword, which was in the wooden sheath behind him, began trembling, and Qin Mu's heart moved slightly. Carefree Sword rarely gave out sword hums. The last time it did so was when he met his father Qin Hanjin on the treasured ship. Carefree Sword trembled continuously, and the clamor of troops could gradually be heard from the fog. There seemed to be countless of people passing by here. "Look under our feet. The water is gone," Xiong Qiu exclaimed. Qin Mu immediately lowered his head and saw that Surging River had vanished from under their feet. Replacing the river was a dry and parched yellow land. The fog gradually became fainter and fainter, so they could see moving figures around them. Qin Mu, Xiong Xiu, and the rest couldn't help being stunned. Their bodies froze when they saw a barren desert surrounding them, the yellow sand filling the horizon. Tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners wearing olden-style clothing were leading huge beasts to construct large buildings. These buildings didn't look like houses for humans to stay. They were tall, with pagodas reaching the clouds and gold and jade palaces radiating glorious splendor. All of them looked like places in which giants or heavenly gods would reside. On the tall altars stood brilliant golden heavenly gods. All of them had human bodies, but their heads were varied. Some were bird-like, while others matched different beasts. They all wore golden armor, and their divine eyes were shining brightly. They were living gods, and it seemed like here would be eternal radiance where their bodies stood. Tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners were building palaces for gods under their supervision, making the scale of the construction grand and spectacular. However, wasn't Qin Mu and the rest walking above surging river? How could this place then be a desert? A few hornless dragons dragged a treasured carriage through the sky, and the group could head a voice rumble through the sky. By the orders of High Emperor, Ministry of Works shall construct West Palace and open up irrigation works and transportation. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. High Emperor? The third move of sword picture that village chief imparted to me is Calamity of High Emperor. What relation does the High Emperor from Calamity of High Emperor have with the High Emperor from the orders mentioned just now? A god with a dragon's head standing on an altar bowed to receive the orders. His body then trembled as he transformed into an azure dragon, summoning clouds and rain, drawing water over to water the barren desert. At the same time, another god that held onto a bronze plow transformed into a giant, cutting into a mountain and digging a canal for the irrigation works. Another god then took out a treasured vase which floated in midair. It pointed downwards and vegetation instantly flooded out, turning the desert into a grassland with dense forests that grew frantically. There was also another god who took out a huge cauldron. When it landed on the ground, a mountain range rose from the land, changing the terrain. In no time, the desert turned into a green mountainous region. Qin Mu and the rest stared blankly at this sight. The boundless abilities that the gods of High Emperor era used to change the heaven and earth, a blue sea into mulberry fields, did not seem to cost them much effort. This huge river should be surging river, right? Qin Mu was stunned. He saw that a god that was wielding a bronze plow was opening up a main river stream. It was very long and surging toward the east. The shape of this huge river was slightly similar to that of surging river, but the path wasn't exactly the same. At that moment, fog surged over once again and drowned out everything. While the group was distracted by this, they could feel the land tremble violently and heard huge rumbles that sounded like the sky crumbling and the earth rending. Within the fog was a sight of an apocalypse. The sky was swirling, and the earth was flipping over. Volcanoes, meteors, thick smoke, lightning flooded the once grand palaces, burying a civilization. The group heard a rumbling behind them, and when they turned back to look, a natural moat was gradually rising up, blocking off the land. The fog gradually dispersed, and the time and space gradually changed. The natural moat slowly regained clarity, and the waterfalls began to pour into surging river once more. The yellow sand under everyone's feet turned back into flowing water, flowing day and night toward the east. PSSH, PSSH. The two white bats that were hanging under the dragon Qilin's chin were stunned. Losing their firm grips, they fell into the water. They immediately flew out and hugged each other while shivering. Great ruins are too strange. Cult Master Qin, quickly send us back to Ghost Valley. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fu brothers, you two are also part of the strange things in Great Ruins, and you still say that Great Ruins are strange? You brothers have scared God knows how many explorers in Ghost Valley. The two white bats looked at each other in dismay. We are also strange? Qin Mu was angry yet at the same time found it funny. These brothers didn't have the least bit of self-awareness. They had no idea how terrifying was the strangeness of Ghost Valley, which was filled with all kinds of strange life forms. Even celestial beings couldn't say that they would definitely manage to pass through that place unscathed. On top of that, the brothers were the guardians of Ghost Valley, and so the strangest of all things there. The fog in the surroundings didn't disperse completely. When looking at the natural moat, everything was hazy. Suddenly, clouds of the fog floated over, and when they came close, they showed up to be gray figures that passed right through them. Everyone hurriedly turned around and saw the fog gathering together again. A voice came from it. What happened in the High Emperor era? Why did this magnificent time pass? Was what happened just now an echo of history? A record of what has happened? Replaying a scene from times past due to coincidence and fate? This land is truly wonderful, and the people of the ancient empire are also admirable. Your Majesty, Dao Sect, and Great Thunderclap Monastery have some records that were passed down throughout the years. Your Majesty just has to give an order to send them over. Excellent, have them send them over. I don't want to bother with these monks and Taoists that keep interfering with my reforms. Without a reform, how can we change the lives of the people? I don't want to see them. The fog walked toward the natural moat, saying, I don't want our founding emperor era to end up in the same predicament. We have to learn from the lesson of our predecessors. How could such a magnificent empire, with gods ruling the mortal world and working for the people, ended up in ruins? Such a powerful and rich era. With excitement, Qin Mu looked toward the fog. Founding emperor? On the family register of Qin family, the one in the first position was founding emperor. He was the ancestor of the Qin family. Qin Mu immediately chased after that human-shaped fog, but its speed was really fast, leaving him behind in just a matter of a few steps. Qin Mu executed heaven-pilfering divine legs and ran as fast as lightning, but the fog had still suddenly disappeared. He stopped in a daze. Founding emperor empire. The empire before great ruins should have suffered a calamity, but how was founding emperor empire related to Carefree Village? Xiong Xiu and the rest caught up. The woman looked around before asking, Cult Master Qin? That site earlier? An echo of history. He then composed himself and said, There are many weird things at the source of Surging River. This place is connected to numerous worlds, so when night falls, many weird things happen around here. Yet never did I expect weird things to happen during the day as well. From the echo of history earlier, this place should be where one of High Emperor's temporary imperial residence rested. We may find some ruins from that era here. An echo of history? Xiong Xiu and the rest were stunned. How could things that had happened show themselves again? Yet Qin Mu had seen an echo of history before. On the treasured ship, he had seen the scene of when his father Qin Hanjin had been ambushed. This kind of echo of history was usually the mark left behind in time by strong practitioners. Echoes of history were usually activated by a person, object, or incident that was related to the original, and had a strong sense of coincidence. The echo of history on the treasured ship that time was due to Qin Mu and Carefree Sword, so what could have caused the echo of history this time? It was two echoes of history this time. Qin Mu suddenly came to a realization that it could be said that they'd seen an echo of history within an echo of history. When founding emperor came to this place, he had activated the first echo of history and saw the incident when the gods under High Emperor had changed the desert in the ancient times. Then, the second echo of history was when founding emperor and the rest had appeared on Surging River. The first echo of history was part of the second echo of history which got recorded by time as well. Then what had activated this echo of history? Could it be Carefree Sword again? Behind Qin Mu, Carefree Sword had already quietened down and no longer let out any sword hums. The echo of history had also completely dispersed. There was no more fog on the river surface, and the sky was clear with the sunlight blazing intensely. The fog had come out from nowhere and left in the same manner. Too strange. Why is strange stuff happening here? Wait a minute. The echo of history had also happened on Father's treasured ship. At that time, it was stuck between Yudu and the real world, with the beehive seals sealing the entrance. If the circumstances are the same, then the echo of history here must have also been because there's an entrance to another world somewhere around here. Qin Mu pondered about it. Maybe the echo of history was reflected on the barrier between worlds, and once it was activated, past events would be shown. He and village chief had met the messenger of death near here and entered the living realm of the dead of Fengdu. The second time he came here, he had also met the messenger of death and entered the living realm of the dead to borrow moonship. The living realm of the dead was close, so Yudu should be close as well. The source of Surging River seems like an important node that connects the worlds. Maybe there's a divine art here that goes to other worlds. There are definitely nodes that connect things to other worlds. Qin Mu regained his composure, and layers of light swirled in his eyes, revealing cyan heaven's eyes. Looking around, he didn't discover any abnormalities. He raised his head to look upwards, and after a moment, he saw a trace of abnormality. The sky was the same blue, but he actually saw two clouds meeting each other and passing through one another. According to his knowledge, when two clouds met, they would converge. Yet even though these two clouds had passed through each other, it was as if they had never touched anything. This situation looked more like two clouds existing in different time and space, so they couldn't meet and collide. This meant that there were two skies that were overlapping above their heads. No, it may be three. Qin Mu leaped up and sprinted high into the sky. Suddenly, a wind blew over and made him shiver. It may also be 4 overlapping skies or even 5. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 328, Old and New Sword God. The directions of the clouds and wind were different. One was heading left, while the other was heading right. And in the sky where the two clouds were, the direction of the wind was completely different. It was unexpectedly blowing downwards. The only reason behind such a situation could be that the two clouds and the wind existed in a different space. From the clouds and wind, there were at least 3 layers of it. If the skies of Yudu, which was always in the darkness, or the hazy Fengdu had appeared, they would definitely be black or gray. Even though they weren't such, Qin Mu was certain that those two worlds were close by. This meant that the source of surging river might have 5 worlds overlapping one another. When night fell, darkness would invade, and the worlds would appear one after another, coming onto the bustling stage. When I have time, I will definitely need to go to the place where West Earth connects to Great Ruins. The darkness comes from there, so I might discover more secrets in that place. Qin Mu came down from the sky with his head aching. What exactly were those echoes of history? What were the worlds that were connected to the source of surging river? Where were the connecting points? There were many secrets in Great Ruins, and there also seemed to be quite a number of them in surging river. Some secrets are something I can't touch or solve. If I tried to do it by force, our lives would be put in danger. Let's go back to the village first. As they headed down the river, Xiong Xiu couldn't help sizing Qin Mu up. She couldn't resist asking curiously, "Cult Master Qin, did you really grow up in Great Ruins?" Qin Mu nodded and asked with puzzlement, "Why are you asking this? How did you survive in such a dangerous place? There are all kinds of strange beasts in Great Ruins, all kinds of strange things, dangers, and even the invasion of darkness at night, when devils and monsters wreak havoc. There are even other worlds overlapping with Great Ruins frequently. It's truly unimaginable for you to have survived up until now." Qin Mu smiled. "Big Sister Palace Master, you're mistaken. Great Ruins are actually very safe, much safer than the outside. The real danger lies outside. When I first walked out of Great Ruins and came to Eternal Peace, I stayed in an inn beside the river, and an incident happened that very night. That place was called Dike River County, and the people in the entire county died. Only me and Linger managed to escape. I had never met with such an incident in Great Ruins." Xiong Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You can't say that Eternal Peace is more dangerous than Great Ruins just because of that. It was only a coincidence. Ever since I entered Eternal Peace, I've suffered murderous intents and killings, as well as assassination attempts. In comparison, Great Ruins are much safer. The greatest danger I encountered in Great Ruins was also caused by the outside people barging in. Thus, Great Ruins is the safest place. Qin Mu explained with a calm expression. Xiong Xiu was puzzled. She didn't understand how he could feel that Great Ruins were safer than the outside world. The dragon Qilin chuckled. Palace Master might not know, but when Cult Master goes out, he doesn't even dare to use his real name. This is because the moment he used his real name, people rushing to kill him would line up all the way from Eternal Peace Empire to disabled elderly village. The righteous practitioners are all itching to kill him. Qin Mu gave him a stare and immediately explained to Xiong Xiu, "Our heavenly saint cult is actually very righteous, so don't be misled. That's right, once we reach the village, I'll be able to get rid of your poison. What do you plan to do after that?" Xiong Xiu was in a daze. Return to True Heaven Palace? Now that only her daughter was left, she didn't have the confidence to return to True Heaven Palace to seize the power and the position of the Palace Master back. On top of that, she was worried about Xiong Qir's life. However, she couldn't accept giving up the foundation of her ancestor. Qin Mu caught the expression she made and smiled. Even though I can get rid of your coiling poison, your cultivation won't recover straight away. I'll still need to help you recuperate and assist you in recovering your vital qi. If you can't make a decision, I have a suggestion. Why don't you follow me to Eternal Peace Empire for some time? I'm the academician of Imperial College, so I can recommend you to teach at Imperial College. Xiong Shiyu's beautiful gaze was like clear water as she looked deeply into his eyes, subconsciously giving off the aura of a mistress of a sacred ground. I'm the mistress of True Heaven Palace, and you are asking me to teach in Imperial College? Qin Mu thought for a moment and said, Then why don't you come to our Heavenly Saint Cult School Hall to teach? Xiong Shiyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Let me go to Imperial College first. 5 days later, they finally reached disabled elderly village. Qin Mu first went to find Hu Linger, and a few white foxes came out of her room, speaking the human language. Young master, big sister has gone to Eternal Peace Empire to look for you, and she has been gone for a few months. Qin Mu inquired about the details, and the white fox in the lead said, Great Demon King came to force Big Sister to marry him, so she beat him up. Great Demon King then called his dad over who Big Sister couldn't defeat, so she ran away, saying she would find young master in Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu bade farewell and brought everyone toward disabled elderly village. When it came in sight, Qin Mu became excited and shouted out loudly, Grandpa Village Chief, Grandpa Apothecary, I'm back! Xiong Shiyu looked at this small village and saw an old man with a scraggly beard sitting on a recliner at the village entrance. He had no arms or legs, and the beard on his face was very unkempt. His hair was messy as well. There was a flock of chickens patrolling in the village, looking very awe-inspiring. Oh, Moore is back? You've grown taller again. The messy old man swayed in his recliner, looking at Xiong Shiyu and the 2 white bats while basking in the sun. After a moment, his expression changed to that of astonishment. This girl is very pretty and her cultivation is also very strong. Pity she's poisoned. The 2 white bats are a little interesting. The 2 white bats went to hang upside down from the tree above his head and sized village chief with interest. You're very strong as well. Qin Mu couldn't help frowning upon examining village chief. He then ran into the village to fetch a pig slaughtering knife before going into Granny C's room to find a white cloth and coming back. In a basin of hot water, he wetted the towel, then covered village chief's face. After a while, Qin Mu uncovered the towel and used a pig slaughtering knife to help him shave his beard. Village chief, where are the people from the village? Grandpa Apothecary? He's not in the village? Take a look. Your beard is almost dragging on the floor. Apothecary had ran away. Village chief sighed and said, A few women found their way here and scared him off, leaving me here alone. I don't have any limbs, so I can't crawl back into the room. Qin Mu jumped in shock and cried out, Village chief, how long have you stayed here at the village entrance? Almost 2 months. Qin Mu was speechless. This old man had actually not moved for 2 months, staying at the village entrance motionlessly, allowing himself to be windswept and battered by rain, even letting the darkness surround him. This should be considered as having achieved a new realm in laziness. Xiong Shiyu also jumped in shock. From the layout of the stone statues in the village, the rays from them wouldn't have shone until here. Then this messy old man who had lain here for 2 months without dying, was he a god? Or were the strange things in the darkness not interested in him? Qin Mu shaved off village chief's beard and washed his face for him. He then cut off his messy white hair and groomed him before carrying the old man into his room, changing the clothes on his body into a new set before going to wash the old ones. He then carried the old man out to place him back on the recliner, pouring a pot of tea for him before asking, Grandpa Ma and the rest haven't returned? Old Ma came back once. Dao Master and old Rulai had also found their way over. The latter said he wasn't Rulai anymore and severed one of his arms. He told me that he couldn't return old Ma his children, but he could still return him an arm. Qin Mu cried out, Old Rulai severed his own arm? That's right. Old Rulai's arm was pecked at by the hen dragons. It's in the chicken coop, though, since the hen dragon couldn't eat it. Village chief sighed. Old Ma may look cold and hate the world, but when old Rulai severed his arm to give it to him, he was still moved and cried. He went to Great Thunderclap Monastery to oversee it, saying that he would return once a new Rulai came. I reckon he won't be coming back. He plans to wait for the new Rulai, but once he will sit down on the seat of Rulai, he will discover that he's Rulai. In a daze, Qin Mu said, I'm going to Ghost Valley, so I can find him on the way there. Where's Grandpa Cripple? Isn't he always inseparable from Grandpa Ma? They are inseparable, so he naturally went to be a guest at Great Thunderclap Monastery. He said he was afraid that old Ma would be at a disadvantage. Village chief revealed a worried expression. I'm afraid that after old Ma becomes Rulai, he will discover that his entire mountain is an illusion. Qin Mu also didn't see Butcher, Blind, and Mute, so he asked about them as well. Blind and Butcher had run off with old Dao Master and old Rulai, saying that they wanted to take a look at Little Jade Capital. Mute didn't seem to have had any plans to leave the village, but just before the day Apothecary escaped, Mute suddenly went crazy, picking up his belongings and rushing into the darkness, chasing after something. He had yet to return. Granny C hadn't yet returned. She had to still be at Eternal Peace Empire, suppressing her heart devil and sharpening her nature. Qin Mu tidied up the village and put all treasures and things that looked like treasures into his 2 Taotai sacks. He then came to the herb garden at the village entrance and stretched his hand out. Flying swords stabbed into the surroundings and tunneled underground, slicing something underneath the soil. Qin Mu raised both his hands as if lifting something. Then the entire herb garden flew upwards and was put into Pangong Tso's Taotai sack. It was much better than Qin Mu's own, and the space inside could even store a piece of land. Qin Mu picked Apothecary's herb basket and placed Village Chief inside it. Village Chief was instantly angered. Rascal, what are you doing? Put me down. I can't let you stay here. Qin Mu tightened the herb basket to his back while saying, What if something happens to you? Who will know? From now on, Grandpa Village Chief will follow me wherever I go. Village Chief was silent for a moment, slightly moved in his heart. He smiled. Put me down. Silly child. I'm old. I can't move around anymore. I even promised Yama to go to his living realm of the dead after death. When I die, a bird god will come and fetch me. Qin Mu instantly felt the herb basket becoming incomparably heavy, as though he was carrying a mountain. He knew Village Chief wasn't willing to leave Great Ruins and blinked before saying, Doesn't Grandpa Village Chief want to meet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor? Does the old sword god not want to meet the new sword god? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is being acclaimed as the saint that appears once every 500 years, so he is definitely worth meeting. The herb basket on Qin Mu's back instantly became lighter, and Village Chief's tone seemed to gain a hint of heroism. The new sword god? Oh well, it's also a good thing to meet him before I die. Go. Let us meet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 329. Sea of Blood. In Great Thunderclap Monastery, the bell rang non-stop. It was the bell to welcome visitors. While Qin Mu carrying Village Chief up the mountain, he saw a dignified Rulai leading all the monks to welcome them. At this moment, the youth was slightly depressed. The cold-faced yet heartwarming Ma Wangshan had still become the Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery, a Buddha. Old Ma couldn't let go of the place he had grown up in even if the monks from there had killed his wife and children. It was not old Rulai's intention, after all, just what the monks under him had done. He was old Rulai's disciple, so the two of them knew each other very well. Old Rulai was old and couldn't control the monks under him anymore. The Arhats of Arhat Cloister had gone down the mountains with monks from other cloisters, and so old Ma's wife and children had lost their lives. Old Rulai severed his arm and gave it to him. Even though this wouldn't resolve the hatred in his heart, he still had to succeed his master's cassock and alms bowl. He couldn't let Great Thunderclap Monastery disappear just like this. When he returned to his homeland and sat on the throne of Rulai, the wind swept azure clouds past his body. When that wind dispersed, He suddenly achieved true enlightenment, breaking through the last realm of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and succeeding in cultivating Brahma. From Sakra to Brahma was a moment of enlightenment, a kind of perfect awakening. On the golden peak of Great Thunderclap Monastery, Qin Mu looked at old Ma, who had educated him on how to be an adult and had all kinds of emotions in his heart. In the end, he called him senior brother. This Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery had cultivated to the highest realm, the realm of Brahma. His corporeal body, spiritual sense, and tathata were perfected and had 20 heavens behind him, with Brahma sitting in the lotus position while gods and Buddhas of all sizes surrounded him, giving off radiance like perpetual daytime, looking sacred and merciful. Senior brother, old Ma greeted him in return. Qin Mu's face turned dim. Now that old Ma was sitting in this position, he was no longer the old Ma from the past, he was Rulai. He had to put down his worldly affairs and let the four elements be vanity. Cripple was nearby. Even though he had said he would just go to attend the ceremony, he had actually been worried about old Ma's safety. He was afraid that the monks of Great Thunderclap Monastery would harm him. However, now that old Ma had cultivated to the highest realm in Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, there was no need for protection, so Cripple was also itching to move. There were treasures everywhere in this Great Thunderclap Monastery, and they made this old rogue unable to sit still. He wanted to steal, but he wouldn't be able to face his conscience then. So when he saw Qin Mu and village chief, he couldn't resist suggesting to leave as soon as possible. Qin Mu wanted to stay for a few days, but when night came he saw bright lights coming from the north, the Qingmen Pass. With such glorious lights lighting the sky, one thing was certain. The battle at Qingmen Pass was very intense. Beside Qingmen Pass was Ghost Valley, where the two white bats lived. It wasn't considered too far from Great Thunderclap Monastery. Early next morning, Qin Mu bade farewell and brought village chief, Xiong Xiu, Cripple and the rest to leave. When I met old Ma, he was the most famous constable in the world, known as Divine Constable Ma. He almost caught me. Cripple looked back at the golden peak of Mount Meru, which was shining brilliantly as resonating Buddha voices rang in the air. They materialized into words, into a lotus, and into apparitions of Buddhas surrounding the sacred ground. Cripple fell into a daze and said in a low voice, "He caught me many times and we fought many times. The one I was afraid of and respected the most was him. When I was young, I was an orphan with nothing at all, begging for food everywhere. When I couldn't endure my hunger, I would steal. I didn't dare to snatch because I was thin and frail. Sometime later, I was caught by an old constable who didn't send me to see the official and only made me stop stealing. He taught me crafts and was like a father to me. I followed him and fantasized about being a constable like him one day. Old Ma reminds me of him. I feel like old Ma looks especially like him when he's stern." Qin Mu sat on the dragon Qilin's back, not saying anything as he listened to Cripple talking about his past with village chief and the rest. "I didn't have a dad, so I always felt that the old constable was my dad. During the years I followed him, I was especially hard-working and happy. But one day, the old constable died." Cripple's eyes relaxed, and his tone became calmer. At midnight, his enemies came to find him. I was asleep then, but shouts from outside woke me up. He barged into my room and sent me out of the house with his life. He told me, "Child, be a good man. Run." I wasn't wearing any clothes then, so I just ran butt naked. I ran and ran until my speed became faster and faster, faster and faster. I cried for help, but no one came, no one. A thin, frail, and butt-naked boy had been helplessly running, crying for help, yet no one came to help him. Cripple ran from night until day and covered over 10,000 miles. When he came to his sense, he returned to the residence of the old constable, but it had already been razed to the ground. He could only dig out the charred bones of the old constable. He wanted me to be a good man like he'd been throughout his life, but how had he ended up? I don't want to be a good man. He didn't want me to steal, so I shall steal. In a lonely voice, Cripple continued. I stole while I ran, and as I did that, my reputation rang louder and louder, until I was referred to as Thief God by the people. All the bullshit seals and forbidden arts were nothing in my eyes. I ran past the wind, past the clouds, past the lightning, and stole throughout the whole world. Whatever sect, whatever sacred ground, I stole from all of them. At one point, I found his enemies and stole their heads. When I paid my respects to the old constable again and wanted to become a good man, I had already caught the bad habit of stealing, and no matter what I did, I couldn't quit. After that, I met old Ma. He reminded me of the old constable, so I feared him a bit, and I respected him. Now that he has become Rulai, his merciful look reminds me if the old constable had become a Buddha. Village chief popped his head out from the herb basket. Old Ma won't become Buddha. When a new Rulai comes one day, he will take down his cassock and become the old Ma from the past. Cripple raised his head to gaze at the sky. I hope so. Qin Mu let out a shaky breath and said in a low voice, Old Ma will definitely come back. Along this journey, he had gotten rid of the poison in Xiong Shiyu's body and even prescribed a few types of spirit pills to nourish her vital qi. After that, they finally came to Ghost Valley, and the two white bats flew into the ravines of Ghost Valley. They hung down on one tree and bade farewell to Qin Mu and the rest. Cult Master, come over and play when you're free. We won't eat you, Fu Yuqiu said. Qin Mu laughed loudly and waved goodbye. The two white bats immediately flew into Ghost Valley while shouting, Let's wake the old ancestors up and make them give birth to a few girls so we can breed. Even if they give birth to them, they'll be our great-grandmas, so how are we going to breed? Furthermore, what if both of the old ancestors are male? Shut up! The dragon Qilin left Ghost Valley, and they soon came to a battlefield that unfolded before them on a magnificent scale. The forest in the Duck Tongue Zone had already been razed to the ground. Duck Tongue Zone stretched throughout close to 1,000 miles, and the woodland and mountainous region had all been flattened by the two parties, becoming the battlefield of Barbarian D Empire and Eternal Peace Empire. When Qin Mu and the rest came to this place, a large-scale battle was on the way. Tens of thousands of soldiers in the mountain passes on both sides were rushing forward with their earth-shattering divine arts. Huge strange beasts stepped forth and brought countless divine arts practitioners with them, once they landed on their backs. Below the mountain-sized strange beasts were martial arts practitioners wielding knives and swords. They rushed forward frantically and collided with the enemies on land. In a split second, flesh and blood filled the sky. Above the heads of the strange beasts, flying ships filled the sky, their flags fluttering. Cannons fired for days on end, and lines of light that were as thick as water barrels bombarded the enemy army with destructive force, vaporizing everything they touched. There were also countless knife and sword pellets spinning rapidly in midair, the lights from which pierced flesh. There were also some great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace who had transformed into golden-colored bird-headed mutants. Once they flapped their wings and shook their hands, countless rays shot off in all directions. On the ground, there were golden elephant-headed giants charging forward furiously. On both sides of the mountain passes were huge mirrors that shone into the sky on the souls of divine arts practitioners. Next to them were huge flags that swept to the side and changed the wind and clouds, causing lightning to rain down on the battlefield. There were also huge cloud chariots being pulled by topless giants into the battlefield and causing blood and flesh to fly wherever they went. Upon reaching the front line of the battlefield, the giants suddenly stopped the cloud chariots and opened them up. Countless bottle gourds were placed within them, and when the chariots were opened, venomous insects buzzed out and covered the sun and the sky. They entered the bodies of the enemy army to gnaw on them. There were also sacrificial altars that got pushed out, and the golden great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace cast some kind of shaman spells to kill the generals of Eternal Peace Empire, causing the opposite side to have no leader. Eternal Peace Empire, in the meantime, had sent out groups of divine arts practitioners that were proficient in sword techniques to cut their way through thistles and thorns into the battlefield to kill the golden great shamans on the sacrificial altars. This sight was truly shocking. Both sides had obviously killed numerous people, for the flowing blood had turned into a river, turning Duck Tongue Zone into something like hell. It was Qin Mu's first time seeing such a grand spectacle, and his heart palpitated. This was the battlefield of men, the place where men died. While carrying Xiong Shiyu, whose face was pale, asked in a low voice, How do we cross such a place? My cultivation has not yet recovered. She had only recovered to the standard of celestial being realm, and in this kind of battlefield, the strength of a celestial being realm was simply insignificant. In the battlefield, a strong practitioner of this realm could die at any moment under a killing formation formed by soldiers of 7 stars realm. Even strong practitioners of life and death realm would find it hard to protect their lives if they just barged through a battlefield like this. Xiong Xiu was an existence of cult master level, and upon looking over, she could see that whenever 30 to 50 people gathered together, formation markings would light up. These formations markings would either be on the ground or floating in the air, changing continuously. It showed that even though the battlefield was big, and there were many people, the formations were never messed up. If someone barged in, they would be minced by a battle formation, and even if one didn't kill them, they would be killed by another one after taking a couple of steps. Qin Mu tightened the herb basket on his back, and in the herb basket, village chief smiled. Just walk over. Moor, you have mastered sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood, right? Let me execute it once more for you to see. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly, and boundless sword lights burst forth toward the fighting. In a split second, they shrouded the battlefield in front of the 2 mountain passes, bathing the countless soldiers in the sea of swords. Those sword lights circled and coiled around them, making them not dare to make the slightest movement. Most of the soldiers standing on the 2 mountain passes felt their scalps crawl as they looked down. The place had become a sea of sword lights, and everyone was drowned within it. Beat the gong to recall the troops, people shouted out from the city towers on both sides. However, everyone in the battlefield stood still, not daring to move. None of the troops retreated, and even the flying ships in the sky froze in place. If they moved, it would mean death. If these sword lights moved, there would be a sea of blood. An expert has arrived. On the city tower of Qingmen Pass, a middle-aged man walked out and looked down to see a huge dragon Qilin walking unhurriedly through the sea of sword lights. Imperial Preceptor. All of the soldiers greeted the man in the tower. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 330. A meeting that surpassed countless others. The middle-aged man on the city tower had a pale white face, and it was obvious he had injuries which were yet to heal. This middle-aged man was none other than Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who had been injured in a battle with a god. Even though Qin Mu and Little Poison King Fu Yuanqing had worked together to cure him, he had still been wounded by a god, so he was yet to recover. Barbarian D Empire had taken this chance to invade Eternal Peace. The situation at Qingmen Pass was of utmost importance. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor knew that Eternal Peace Empire had suffered great losses in strength after 2 huge calamities, and in addition to that, he and Emperor Yanfeng had yet to recover to their peak strength. Emperor Yanfeng's injuries were even heavier than his. He was afraid of Barbarian D Empire barging straight in, so he had mobilized the troops to guard Qingmen Pass to the death. He even didn't hesitate to personally come to the battlefield to command the army. When Village Chief unleashed his swords, the shocking sight of one sword suppressing the struggles on the whole battlefield caught his eye. Actually, this wasn't a simple shocking sight. Instead, it was having the ability to turn the entire battlefield into a sea of blood, intimidating the soldiers and cavalry on both sides. The lives of everyone on the battlefield laid in his hands. This kind of sword skill was no longer part of sword skills, but closer to a profound path. This let Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor see an even higher level, the level of the sword path. The sword lights unleashed Village Chief's move were uncountable, but the truly terrifying thing was that the movement of each and every sword light was different, restraining every martial and divine art practitioner. This was something that was nearly impossible. There were tens of thousands of people on the battlefield, and the cultivation of each and every person was different. The martial and divine arts they learned also had differences. Furthermore, with the battle formations having a myriad of changes, if he wanted to restrain everyone, he had to restrain all of their divine arts, martial arts, spirit weapons as well as formations. The number of things to be calculated was at an unimaginable level. To be able to reach such a level, one could be called God, the God of the sword. Sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood. I've seen this kind of sword skill before. It was in the painting of Art Saint. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor focused his gaze toward the dragon Qilin and saw Qin Mu and the rest standing on the creature's back. Even though these people were all very strong, they didn't catch his attention. I could see the extremes of sword skill from that painting, and I had studied the sword technique of the man in the painting for the past 200 years. I would have new gains whenever I observed this painting for a long time. When I no longer could see anything new, I thought I had already reached his level. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor reminisced about the painting and tried to look for the man in the painting, but he couldn't find him. His gaze then landed on Qin Mu's back. The youth was carrying a herb basket within which he could see a white-haired old man that had no limbs. This old man didn't look like the man in the painting. That person was a sword god in his heyday. His acute spirit burst forth like a sword that had just drunk blood. The old man in the herb basket, however, was in the last of his days. He looked as if his light could be extinguished at any moment. There was no sight on him of the high spirits of the sword god in the painting. However, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was certain that this handicapped old man was the sword god from back then. After all, the enlightenment for his sword skills came from the sword god in the painting. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's body trembled slightly, and he let out a shaky breath before instructing the people around him, "Welcome the guests!" The city gates opened, and the soldiers in the city lined up on both sides. The dragon Qilin walked in with his head held high. At that moment, all the sword lights in the battlefield poured over like a flood at Qin Mu, going into the herb basket behind his back. Village Chief popped his head out and saw a middle-aged person coming over to welcome him. He was the man who was said to be the saint that appears once every 500 years, the man that was said to be the #1 practitioner under the gods, the man that was acclaimed to be the current generation's sword god. The gaze of the two people met, and ripples billowed in their hearts. The sword god of the previous generation and the sword god of the current generation had finally met. Next to the battlefield, the beating of a bronze gong came from the city towers on both mountain passes. It was the sound of retreat, sending orders to the soldiers on the battlefield to withdraw. The tens of thousands of soldiers felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Everyone instantly felt their bodies drenched in sweat. In Qingmen Pass, Village Chief, who had been in the herb basket, flew out. As if he had grown arms and legs, he walked toward Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the two strongest men of their respective generations met. "You have learned sword?" Village Chief asked. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did a disciple greeting and said respectfully, "Disciple has learned sword in his early years, but haven't done that since reaching 160 years old." "You understood sword at 160 years old?" Village Chief asked. "I had read extensively through all the techniques and ultimate arts in the world and comprehended boundless divine arts. Thus I understood sword and started to create my own sword skills." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor answered solemnly. Village Chief smiled. "Display your sword skills for me." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drew his sword, and sword light filled the heaven, lighting up the world. His sword skills had countless changes, were as complicated as the numerous stars in the sky, yet simple like the counting rods. Some were straight, some were winding, as if they could transform into all the skills in the world, giving others an indescribable feeling. There was a kind of bearing that pressed forward in his sword skills, a spirit that was like a blazing fire tearing through the bright flowers coming from the reform. It seemed to want to set all the things in the world ablaze, changing the inherent heaven and earth, the never-changing great Tao, to reform everything that is trite, tear open, and reveal the ugly faces of the degenerates of the old generation. This man wanted to use his sword to change the empty and trite paths of this world, to open up new paths and let the world enter a new age. His sword skills had already surpassed technique and become skills which incorporated his philosophy. Just one step, and he could reach the realm of the path. With philosophy, life was given to sword skills, so his sword skills already had life. Since the path was in front of philosophy, only by surpassing it could he see the path. With only a step forward, he would be able to see the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pulled his sword back and gasped for breath. His injuries were still not yet healed, so his cultivation wasn't like it was before. However, before the previous generation's sword god. He was like a student wishing to show his most perfect sword skill and looking forward to hearing his evaluation. Superb sword skills, village chief praised. No doubt you're the #1 man under the gods, the saint that appears once every 500 years. Before death, I have finally met someone who I can interact with. I've come out this time just to meet you, to let you witness the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then said solemnly, "Today at Qin Mu Pass, there are 1,000,000 soldiers stationed, many of whom are my students. However, I'm your student. There are also numerous scholars from Imperial College who had come here to lend their strength in the face of the Empire's disaster. So may teacher please expound his wisdom and dispel our doubts." Village chief smiled. "I dare not. It's just an interaction." The two of them walked side by side with Qin Mu following behind them. Xiong Xiu raised her head to look at a man approaching old age and a man at his robust years with a bizarre gaze while saying under her breath, "In my West Earth's true heaven palace, there are no such outstanding men. With the women of our West Earth in charge, the men are all yes men doing whatever they are told to do. If the men of West Earth were as bold and as capable as them, why would us women need to be in charge?" They walked into the city, and Qin Mu saw numerous scholars from Imperial College. All of them were sitting cross-legged and waiting quietly. They were unable to hide the excitement that was on their faces. Now that Barbarian D Empire was launching a full-scale invasion on Eternal Peace Empire after it had just gone through a massive rebellion and snow disaster, there was no way for people to make a living. The population was declining, and the people were mostly destitute and homeless. Before the empire could settle down, the rations were also in short supply. Even in the army, the rations were lacking. So many scholars from Imperial College could only save on food after coming here, not daring to eat till they were full. Qin Mu saw Wei Yong, Qin Yu, and the rest. Wei Yong was originally a big fatty, but now he had slimmed down quite a bit from starvation. Only when they reached fall's harvest could this hard-pressed situation turn slightly better. Village Chief and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sat down, and Village Chief said in a pace that was neither too fast nor too slow, "The purpose of my visit is not to talk about sword skills. I shall only talk about the path. The sword path. As for how much you can take from my speech, it will depend on your comprehension. There was no such thing as a sword path in this world before, but ever since weapons such as a sword were created, a sword path came to be. Numerous soldiers that had come back from the front lines walked over. Some of them took off their armor to sit on the ground while some just stood and listened. Many people revealed puzzled expressions when they heard the lecture of this elder. Someone said in a low voice, "Could the great Tao of heaven and earth be created? Aren't we divine arts practitioners cultivating the natural great Tao of heaven and earth?" Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. He recalled his conversation with Heavenly King Yu about how the great Tao of heaven and earth had changed. The creativity of humans had born numerous great Tao of heaven and earth that didn't exist in the world at the start. It was also that same creativity that had changed the old Taos into something new. When a great Tao is changed, the skills would also change, thus it was known as a reform. Heavenly King Yu felt that reforms could touch the benefits of gods and devils. However, what Village Chief said was much more profound. Everyone was puzzled because they were all people who had cultivated Qi, and their inherent knowledge was to learn the paths, skills, and divine arts that were passed down to them. Furthermore, divine arts relied on a path and skills, so if they changed their inherent understanding, one could well imagine how big of a blow it would be to their hearts. "How is a great Tao created?" asked Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. "Walk to the extreme and it will be created." Imperial Preceptor, have your sword skills reached their extremes? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was slightly stunned and said, "Just a little more." Village Chief revealed a smile. "Let me help you." He stabbed at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the scenery around them changed. Thousands of mountains and rivers came flooding in his face, and in a split second, their surroundings no longer looked like Qin Mu Pass or a battlefield with blood flowing in a red river. Instead, it looked like a whole new world that had fresh green mountain ranges overflowing with greenery, rivers rolling into the distance. Each and every wave looked extremely clear and real, while the veins of each and every leaf on the trees and bushes were complicated, without any two being alike. Everyone stood up, and there were even some people that climbed the mountains while some jumped into the river. There were even some that plucked the flowers formed by sword lights while Qin Mu stretched out his hand to catch a drop of dew trickling down from a leaf. Sword-treading mountains and rivers. This was the sword-treading mountains and rivers that village chief had executed. It was clearly a move that had supreme power, but in village chief's hand, it was completely harmless. Instead of dealing damage, it brought everyone into a bizarre world. It was as if this place was a real world, one formed by a sword path. Even though this situation had a huge impact on them, it was the strongest on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. His body trembled, and his soul palpitated. He squatted and caressed the ground, then raised his head to look up at the starry sky. Village chief had shown him the true face of the path, allowing him to touch the sword path. Suddenly, he felt that a door had been blown open, and he stood there motionlessly with a blank gaze. Village chief saw this sight and exclaimed to himself, "The saint that appears once every 500 years indeed has much better aptitude than Mu'er, comprehending the path in such a short time."